One day you were incredibly lucky and managed to clear an entire dungeon on your own. But before, all this time, he was forced to hide his skills and abilities from those around him. However, no matter how you look at it, all these achievements were nothing more than a coincidence. It was all down to luck and a bit of bluff. Dozens and hundreds of questions rained down on the hero, but being literally a nobody, he could not answer them. However, one of the questions posed, which concerned future plans, interested him. The hero was worried that the truth would come out and everyone would really find out about his low rank. If something like this happens, you'll have a lot of problems. After all, there was someone else in this story. Someone who would have caught the hero in a lie. But the expected death would be much simpler than a curse. No matter how you look at it, disaster looms on all sides. The hero had to do something urgently, ultimately, unable to find a better solution than to refuse to comment. After which, the press cameras started clicking at once. Then new, even more provocative questions rained down on the hero. The noise and hubbub emitted by the reporters took on hysterical features. The hero remained silent, standing with his head bowed. He was well aware that any answer given would lead to dire consequences. Gradually his palm began to tighten. Clenching his fist, the hero came to the conclusion that he had to become a real hunter. After which, in an extremely rude manner, he sent the reporters and their questions packing. This answer made those present hold their breath. A couple of seconds passed, and now reporters were demanding that Kim explain himself. Once again, questions regarding rank were directed to Kim. In his thoughts, the hero lamented that in any case, he would not remain in people's memories as something significant. And yet, the hero tried to understand from what exact moment things went downhill. After some thought, Kim decided that everything had started spinning since his resignation. In fact, it all started much earlier, because Kim was not human at all. Being a creature from another world, the hero decided to start his existence from scratch. In his world, Kim was not happy, being forced to work hard without rest or even vacations. As a creature without the need for sleep or food, in Kim's society such things were considered normal. And yet, as the decades passed, Kim's mental health began to fail. The hero then saw the work itself as the main factor in his suffering. But leaving my job was quite a challenge. At best, Kim would have been struck by a super powerful electric shock. But even if the hero had managed to escape from work, sooner or later, he would still have been tracked down. At that moment, Kim came up with the idea of getting rid of his enslavers. Due to the peculiarities of his species, Kim also could not harm others. A special genetic fuse prevented the hero from even committing suicide. Various plans and daring attempts failed. One day, while Kim was thinking, an interesting idea came to his mind. After all, magic only limited the hero's physical capabilities. This meant that spiritually, Kim could still escape. And then the plan was hatched. Over the next 10 years, Kim prepared diligently to carry out his plan. Thousands of trials and errors were made before the desired magic was finally recreated. It was a manipulation of the soul itself. At the right moment, Kim put his plan into action. The hero's soul was separated from his body, and he rushed towards the nearest planet. Laughing, the hero said goodbye to all the other losers who were stuck in slave labor. In part, Kim even wanted to see how the problems would be resolved without his participation. But there was no time for such things, because it was time for resignation. This is how the first transmigration of souls in history took place. Kim's eyes opened and his hand twitched convulsively. After which, lifting it up, he looked at it questioningly. For the first time, the hero observed such a strangely shaped limb. In his thoughts, Kim guessed that he had entered the body of someone who had recently died. Be that as it may, it's all a trifle. Next, having raised himself a little, he began to develop his vocal cords. The body was functioning properly and was in good condition, but something was bothering Kim. Finding himself in someone else's body, he completely lost control of the host's memory. No matter how hard he tried to dig into the host's brain, the hero was unable to extract any memories from there. Then Kim let out a terrible scream. A sharp pain pierced his stomach. Shortness of breath began. The hero felt that something was wrong. My legs began to give way and my eyelids began to feel heavy. Only now did the hero begin to realize that the carrier had actually died of hunger. So, Kim should have stopped this crisis as soon as possible. But first, the story rewinds a bit, explaining that during the migration, the main condition was that Kim chose a body with powerful magical potential. Even now, the hero realized that he had not taken into account the physical condition of the carrier. The pain of hunger was so unbearable that Kim even burst into tears. Everything inside was burning. A primal instinct pushed the hero to move. Somehow rising, he began to drag himself into another room. First, looking for some way to fill your stomach with food and satisfy your hunger. A few more steps and a light appeared ahead. It was so bright that it caused the hero to have flashbacks. After all, a practically identical glow was present in Kim's home world. Coming into this world, the hero was completely shocked. After all, the place where Kim found himself was completely different from his native world. Looking at the new reality, the hero's eyes froze. Warmth and light spread around. There was a solid support under my feet. But Kim was unable to enjoy these views for long, as he was overcome by hunger. So he continued wandering around the area. Wherever he looked, there was nothing edible around. Finally, the first disappointment with the new planet hit him. Desperate, Kim now understood why the carrier had died. Coughing heavily, the hero felt that his body was once again on the brink of death. Right now, hearing a rustling sound to my side. There, on the asphalt, a beetle was slowly crawling. There was no choice, so Kim grabbed the beetle and began to bring it to his mouth. Just then, someone walked past Kim. The hero stopped, noticing that it was a creature of his own species. Instead of the individual's age, Kim was more concerned with what was in its mouth. Having thrown away the beetle, he decided to take possession of someone else's food. All that remained was to decide how exactly to get hold of someone else's food. Kim stood up and followed the boy. Stubbornly, he pursued him. At some point, the boy's movements slowed down. Hearing footsteps behind him, he looked around cautiously. A moment later, the boy jumped up and started running away. The hero didn't have time to react in any way, so the boy simply ran away. But then, by chance, ornamental plants came into his field of vision. There was nothing else to do, so the hero began to stuff at least them into his mouth. The devouring did not last long, because a piercing scream interrupted the process. For some reason, Kim became interested in the source of the scream. Having thrown away the plucked flowers, he decided to check everything. Now nearby, frozen with horror, stood that same boy. After all, right in front of him was a real monster. Suddenly, the monster began to show interest in the boy. Quickly moving its paws, the monster began to chase after him. As he walked, he opened his mouth wide and prepared to gobble up the little one. At some point, he even successfully grabbed him by the briefcase. Then, with a jerk, the monster tore the briefcase from the boy's shoulders. Even though he fell painfully, he didn't end up in the mouth yet. The monster itself did not stop trying to pursue. Stubbornly trying to catch up with the boy, the monster smashed everything in its path. With each passing moment, the toothy mouth grew closer and closer. This is how this whole bacchanalia reached the hero. The hero himself was in shock, because he had never seen anything like this before. Now, I'm trying to immediately understand what was wrong with human civilization. On the other hand, Kim saw what was happening as more than just a disaster. After all, in the form of a bird monster, he clearly discerned some signs of food. So now, seeing the feathered monster as nothing more than prey. Besides, it was easy as pie for Kim to defeat the monster with the help of magic. Suddenly, he noticed something. Barely visible, the air was permeated with luminous threads. They walked along the entire street, touching the monster and the hero himself. It was the magical power that Kim was able to awaken. Local magic that permeated every cell of the body. And yet, it still raises some concerns for Kim. The whole point is that there were too many streams of magic. In his world, Kim felt the flows of magic as nothing more than filled cups. In the human world, magic was like the ocean itself. Kim clearly realized that by arriving in the human world, he had hit the jackpot. He could already imagine how dazzling the future could be for a person gifted with magic. The reverie was interrupted by the boy's cry for help. With all his might, he begged the strange man to help. Kim sighed heavily, because in their world, this was not accepted. So, Kim was ready to help, but on one condition. After which, he pointed to the food in the boy's hands. This request took the baby by surprise. There was nothing else to do, so the boy agreed to Kim's conditions. Further, he even ran behind him. Sighing, the hero looked up. Next, he ordered the boy to stay strictly behind his back. As a being once responsible for protecting an entire planet, Kim began to work magic. For someone like him, separating the meat from the bones would not be difficult. From the outside, Kim's movements looked at least strange. However, after all the preparations the hero had made, nothing happened. Scratching the back of his head, Kim chuckled, thinking his concentration had broken. Out loud, he began to reflect on the fact that he had not expected such oddities. After which, he decided to use explosive magic. Next, water magic came into play. None of this, not even the summoning of shadows, responded to Kim's efforts. Even the weakest spells in the form of curses did not manifest themselves in any way. Now, being in complete confusion, Kim couldn't find an answer to why magic stopped responding to his calls. And therefore, subsequently, he himself saved himself from the monster. During their escape, even getting onto the roadway, At the last moment, the driver behind the wheel slammed on the brakes. It was only by a miracle that Kim wasn't smeared. Besides the terrifying bird, the driver of the car was now scolding him. Sometimes, looking back, the hero noticed that the bird was relentlessly pursuing him. Overturning and smashing everything in its path, the monster relentlessly rushed after the hero. Kim saw an urgent change of route as his only salvation, but no matter how he tried to speed up, the bird followed him everywhere. Continuing to run, Kim tried to figure out what he had done to offend the bird. With each subsequent movement, his body grew weaker and weaker. Somehow moving his legs, he began to change route again. The monster bird followed behind, crushing the car under her feet. At some point, she made a jump. Having risen a couple of meters into the air, the monster straightened its wings. From now on, it will hover above the rooftops of houses. A couple of seconds later, diving wildly, Kim sped up again, as the bird was clearly aiming at him. During his escape, the hero felt something shoot painfully into his leg. He guessed that the carrier had suffered some damage during his life. So, feeling tired and in pain, Kim made his final movements. Subsequently, having lost all balance, he collapsed to the ground. With all his might, Kim tried to get up. Right now, a furious force rushed past him. There was a loud crash and everything shattered into pieces. Having missed Kim, the monster's fury spread much further down the street. Until finally, somewhere there, having dug a furrow in the ground, the monster stopped. The monster's last movement was a crushing blow with its beak on the concrete surface. The noise and din caused Kim to cover his ears. After a little while, he opened his eyes. Now seeing feathers falling everywhere, slowly, he began to approach the monster's body. Kim couldn't understand whether the monster had simply killed itself against the wall. Thoughtfully, he began to look at her. Recalling some of his knowledge, he guessed that the monster was one of those birds that dived clumsily. The knowledge quickly faded away, as its place was taken by a feeling of hunger. Kim began poking at the bird's carcass, wondering if it was edible. Finally, having decided that poultry meat could be digestible, the hero swallowed his saliva. But then behind Kim, a surprised cry was heard. Standing behind, looking at all this, was a stunned girl. A couple of minutes ago, she heard the boy calling for help from those around him. Immediately, she hurried to come to the rescue. Along the way, the girl was informed that the man in trouble was last seen nearby. Having learned about this, the girl asked everyone else to stay as far away as possible. After all, none other than the rookie killer was operating in the area. Initially, this bird was not considered a formidable opponent, but everything changed when many hunters died due to the monster's ability to develop enormous speeds. So, the girl was in a hurry, because she had to make it before people started dying en masse. Having reached the place where the monster was last seen, an unusual scene appeared before the girl's eyes. Standing rooted to the spot, she gazed for a long time. Only after about a minute, loudly asking about what happened. After all, there, before her eyes, everything looked as if an unknown man had personally finished off the monster. Soon, the hunter Unmi was caught up with by a police officer. The hero, of course, paid attention to the multiple voices behind him. Approaching Kim, the policeman thanked him for the work he had done. It was something new for Kim when he began to be called a hunter. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't understand what people were talking about at all. At the same time, Unmi became interested in how exactly the unknown person dealt with the bird so quickly. At some point, I even began to suspect that the hero had found himself in such a place for a reason. After all, it would be easier to defeat a winged monster outside the city biome. Moreover, in order to follow all the bird's movements, special eyes were needed. Therefore, Unmi came to the conclusion that the unknown hunter's rank was at least C. At the same time, Kim himself stopped the boy who was about to leave for his own business. The hero reminded the boy of the agreement they had once made. Sighing, the boy fulfilled his part of the deal. Immediately, Kim directed the bottle with the drink towards his mouth. Just one sip and the divine taste spread through the throat. For the first time, as a creature that did not need food, the hero felt the incredible taste of it. Unmi watched in bewilderment as the stranger took the child's food so easily. After saying hello, she drew attention to herself. Extending her hand, she introduced herself as a hunter from the association. The hero greeted him in return and even shook his hand. Afterwards, Unmi began to ask the hero for a hunter's license in order to compile a report. Naturally, Kim did not know about any license. After a couple of seconds, he decided to get out of it and explained that he had simply forgotten that one. The girl sighed, deciding to look up the information in the database. Accordingly, further, he began to ask the name of the hero. There was a long silence from Kim, since he had no idea of the bearer's name. All this raised a lot of suspicion on the part of Unmi and, as a result, questions. The girl was afraid that the stranger was using the skills of the awakened one without even registering. Almost shouting, she reminded that such actions were simply illegal. The hero took a long pause, because he did not understand what that person was shouting about. But what Kim was sure of was that he was in trouble. Deciding to continue lying, he told Unmi that he was going home to get his license, after which he went in a different direction from people. Naturally, in reality, Kim was simply planning to run away. After some time, the hero finally found his way home. After rummaging through a lot of things, he found some kind of card. Among the short inscriptions, one also found the name of the bearer, which was absolutely similar to his own. However, the hero was never able to obtain a hunter's license. Continuing to look around the room, Kim accidentally came across packs of cigarettes scattered across the floor. Intrigued, the hero picked up one pack of cigarettes. It was then that a memory flashed through his mind. Vivid moments from the wearer's life related to smoking surfaced in his mind. This revelation did not make Kim very happy. After all, for magicians, nicotine was a real obstacle in mastering spells. After all, magic, being not entirely an ephemeral quantity, interacted with the organs of living beings. This was especially true for the lungs. Kim cursed, because of one idiot, he could no longer use magic. The hero simply could not believe that anyone in their right mind would destroy their own lungs. In Kim's homeworld, such things were simply unthinkable. Panic and despair gripped Kim. No matter how hard he tried, the hero could not change what happened. So, he began to look for ways to further awaken the magic within himself. In any case, Kim had no intention of giving up, since he had already accomplished a lot of the unthinkable. After leaving the apartment, he intended to live out the rest of his new life immersed in happiness. But first, the path led Kim to the police station. Amidst the abuse of all sorts of cattle, the hero apologized for his behavior. Having underestimated the complexity of human life, Kim was arrested just a couple of hours after entering the body. Then Kim got off with a long conversation, but that hunger never went away. Wandering the streets in a semi-conscious state, the hero tried to find a way out of his personal food crisis. There, at some point, I caught a whiff of something. Following the sweet taste, Kim stood in front of the eatery. Once inside, Kim was served pork soup as ordered. Then Kim rejoiced, because the food problems turned out not to be so critical. After stirring the soup with a spoon, he finally decided to try the dish. Just one meal later, Kim's eyes froze. Now something truly beautiful was burning his mouth. But the hero could no longer stop. His hands continued to put food into his mouth on their own. Up until a certain point in time, things were going just fine for the hero. It was for this reason that Kim ended up at the police station without paying for the food. The hero tried in every possible way to get out of it, declaring that he simply paid. Suddenly, one of the station employees recognized Kim. With his help, punishment was avoided. However, the policeman was in no hurry to let Kim go. He started a conversation with the hero about the Hunters Association and the status of Kim's own awakening. Once again helping, he gave the hero a brochure with a testing center. Finally, the characters parted ways, but Kim had no idea what the man was talking about. Looking at the brochure, the hero believed that what was written there should certainly be known to every person. And yet, under the policeman's insistence, the hero decided to visit the place on the brochure. The hero immediately went to the address. After a little while, getting to the testing center itself. Looking at the building, something in the protagonist's cerebellum began to itch. A memory surfaced that the carrier had once been here. One frame was replaced by another, where the examination conclusion F was clearly visible. At some point, he clearly remembered that the carrier, Kim, was indeed awakened. Just then, a familiar female voice called out to the hero. It was Unmi who was interested in Kim's visit to this place. Since the hero was nearby again, the girl again asked to see the hunter's license. The hero hesitated, because last time he had already lied to her. But since some memories returned, Kim decided to be more frank. Finally, he admitted that he never had a license. However, he told that he had undergone the awakening, and even learned his power status. But there was nothing to brag about, since Kim's rank was F. When asked about the monster's capture, the hero admitted that it was simply luck. After all, the stupid bird crashed into the wall itself. After the story was told, there was a pause between the characters. Unmi wasn't very surprised, as cases of the feathered monster committing suicide were not uncommon. Then, the girl got the wrong impression from Kim's appearance that he was extremely relaxed. However, it is still believed that the hero could hide his rank, being a gang member or worse. Without revealing her conclusions, Unmi simply laughed. Looking at how the girl behaved as an alien, Kim decided to practice her facial expressions. As a result, he began to tense his facial muscles. With a creepy smile, Kim agreed that he was lucky. However, the face the hero made only aroused even more suspicion. But before leaving Kim, Unmi decided to find out his name. The hero introduced himself easily. In response, the girl handed him the money. Kim believed that this action was performed as a banal greeting, which meant that Earth's culture was extremely generous. Unexpectedly, the girl admitted that the money given was the hero's share for destroying the monster. By simply comparing the amount of money and the cost of food, Kim could already imagine how much food he could order for himself. Additionally, Eunmi said that the feathered monster itself had no value, but precious stones were found in it. When the price of the stones was announced at 2 million, the hero naturally wanted to know why he received so much less. Eunmi closed her eyes and sighed heavily. As it turned out, the entire remaining amount went to compensate for damages to the city. It turned out that the reward would have been much greater if Kim had not fled the scene of the monster's murder. The hero grimaced at the bitterness of this news, which forced the girl to apologize. After which, she said goodbye and left the hero. Kim watched her silently. The news of the millions that the hero had not received did not evoke the best emotions in Kim. Furthermore, Kim was still annoyed that the host's smoking made magic unavailable. However, no matter how you look at it, he did get at least some kind of bonus from his ridiculous victory. Kim was already making plans to get rich, because having a lot of money, you can be the happiest in the world of people. In advance, he already saw himself resting peacefully, and the hero saw the best way to get rich in becoming a hunter. After all, previously, Kim simply died of hunger, and the fate of his bearer was even more tragic. But from now on, the hero knew one secret. Kim simply had to feed himself with magic. While pondering the solution to pressing matters, he accidentally heard people chatting about something. Pointing their fingers, they pointed to some gate. As he approached the crowd, Kim turned his gaze to the place where everyone was pointing. About 100 meters from the crowd, behind the fence, there was a pulsating whirlpool. This is what the entrances to the locations where the hunt took place looked like. The locations themselves were divided into ranks, and the higher the difficulty, the more serious the opponents encountered. Many brave hunters have perished trying to clear such places. To Kim, the sight of all this looked like nothing more than a bizarre example of magic. So far, the hero didn't really know whether monsters really lived in such places, but Kim had no intention of conducting his experiments in front of a huge crowd. While thinking about searching for other gates, he was suddenly overcome by a special feeling. Something unusual was forcing Kim to move along with it. One by one, he passed the blocks, until finally, the path led him to another gate. The journey was long, and the hero had to climb mountains. Only an hour later, having been exhausted, he reached the fence. Despite warnings, Kim crossed the police tape. Next, boldly moved towards the gate. A couple of minutes later, a group of people found themselves in the same place. The eldest of them contacted his boss. The manager was only concerned about the importance of there being no civilians nearby. Having looked around, the elder reported that there was no one nearby. Subsequently, their conversation touched upon the strange behavior of the gates, which had recently changed their ranks many times. Having promised to conduct a thorough investigation, the elder ended the conversation. After which, he commanded his men to move inside the gate. A minute later, inside the gate, the hunters were making their way through the cave system. Assessing the magical flows, the elder stated that everything resembled a D-rank difficulty. One of the hunters agreed with all of this, reminding that due to the strange behavior, the gate could unexpectedly raise its rank. Moreover, we expect that the reconnaissance will proceed quickly and without incident. Meanwhile, the elder was worried. He even suggested to those accompanying him not to hurry. He was confused that, having traveled so far, the team had never encountered any monsters. Just then, one of the hunters approached the elder, raising his palm to his head. Putting his palm to the top of his head, he did not understand what the elder was so afraid of. However, with each passing second, the horror in the elder's eyes only grew. Behind the bespectacled man, there was a huge monster, in the process of swinging. Somewhere at the same time, Kim was wandering around in the middle of the location's tunnels. For a very long time, the hero also did not encounter any threats on his path. It was now that the barely perceptible magical thread manifested itself again. Kim began to study the area closely. It was mana that permeated everything around. Even though her nature was rough, she had a lot of hidden power. Being a master in the affairs of magic, Kim sensed that it clearly belonged to a person. After walking a couple of meters, he realized that someone else had entered the gate. Then he quickened his pace towards the source of mana. Hiding behind a rock, he decided to investigate what was happening next. At some point, the hero held his breath. After all, in the open space of the cave, a stone golem was rampaging. He had already managed to strike, killing one of the hunters. Straightening up, the golem looked at the remaining living people. Suddenly, the monster's eyes flashed, and its stone fist clenched. Immediately, blood splattered in all directions. With posthumous mutilations, the defeated hunter fell to the ground. The other hunters could barely contain their emotions as they witnessed their friend's quick death. As quickly as possible, the eldest, whose name was Kay, brought them back to their senses. But right now, the golem was taking its next step. The reaction was triggered and Kay sensed something was wrong. Snatching up his shield, he managed to repel the monster's attack. Then he parried. He tried fiercely to tip the scales of power in his favor, and therefore, he carried out an attacking lunge. Following this, a thunderous blow hit the ground. The resulting electrified wave touched the golem, passing through the entire body of the monster. The current caused the stone muscles to contract for a moment. This was enough for Kay to go on an open attack. With all his fury, he attacked the golem. Like a comet falling, it deals devastating damage to him. Kim watched all this from his hiding place with extreme interest. Subsequently, the monster was defeated. However, Kay himself did not radiate joy from the victory. The hunter's bravura words did not inspire him either. Standing up abruptly, he announced that the group would be returning. It was then that the golem's eyes flashed with life again. Sensing danger, Kay tried to do something. But the attempts were in vain, because the stone fingers had already grabbed him. Holding him tightly, the golem brought Kay up to his eyes. After which, with all his might, he slammed him to the ground. Naturally, a blow of such force caused damage to Kay. The already exhausted Kay was again clutched in the golem's hands. Having spun his arm properly, the golem threw the hunter. Naturally, what happened was a shock for those accompanying them. One of them shouted, which attracted the golem's attention. The monster swung, intending to destroy the other uninvited guests. But seeing what had happened to the elder, the other hunters no longer stood still. Drawing their weapons, they were ready to confront the golem. But no matter how strong their blows were, the swords broke on the monster's stone body. The daredevil who challenged the monster found himself practically unarmed. The golem itself did not stand still, and with a wide blow threw the hunter back. He flew past the second team member and fell to the ground. His body was badly damaged, and it seemed that the daredevil had died completely. The only one who could act now was the girl hunter. Inexorably, the stone golem approached her. Filled with fear, she slowly turned her gaze. There, high above her, the monster was already clenching a stone fist. Another second, and the fist rushed towards her. This was how her end was supposed to happen. But Kay unexpectedly came to the rescue. Breathing heavily and bleeding, he held back the golem's onslaught with his last strength. Barely moving his tongue, he ordered the girl to use binding magic. Kay made it clear that without defeating the golem, no one would leave the dungeon alive. He couldn't allow the entire team to be broken up. Once again, he asked the girl to be more efficient. To his shock, she simply ran away. Looking at this, a fierce disappointment could be seen in Kay's eyes. No matter how he tried to call the magician girl, she did not respond at all. Even attempts to come to his senses for the sake of the wounded Min did not help. All these requests of Kay went somewhere into the emptiness of the dungeon. The pressure grew, and the shield beneath the hunter began to bend. In the end, the formidable golem pressed him into the ground. All resistance was broken. Raising his hand, the golem looked at Kay's badly damaged body. And yet, life still flickered within Kay, and the betrayal committed by the girl mage provided fuel for his rage. Not long ago, Kay awakened, and very quickly gathered a team of wonderful hunters around him. Initially, things went quite smoothly for them, but those ended, it's a pity. Just when the golem was about to trample Kay, a pebble flew into his leg. The monster immediately turned its attention. Kim stood nearby, finding the sight disgusting. He couldn't understand whether the problem was in the case itself, or whether it was natural for people to be like this. Next, Kim began to boast that he had managed to conduct an analysis. Approaching the stone golem, the hero concluded that its model was very outdated, and yet Kim was glad of this meeting. After all, the hero knew that the golem was just a doll, set in motion by magic. In Kim's homeworld, these devices were encountered constantly. Some were engaged in cleaning, others in construction. Only the very best of the species were given the honor of becoming fighting machines. So, Kim's knowledge about stone golems was quite extensive. There were no monsters present in this place, since it was the guardian golem who got rid of those. Kim had no choice but to deal with it all. Even though the hero couldn't use magic, he had some options in reserve. The next moment, the golem's open fingers rushed towards the hero. Kim easily dodged this attack. From the impact, the golem's hand entered deep into the soil. The golem pulled its hand out of the ground and tried to hit Kim as it ran. Once again, the hero easily dodged attacks on himself. But the golem had no intention of stopping, changing its attack patterns. Swinging with all his might, he slammed his hands into the area in front of him. The earth shook and splinters flew in all directions. Just then, a trickle of sweat ran down Kim's face. He realized that he had once again overestimated himself. even though Kim could have avoided the golem's attacks. But due to the weakness of the body, he could not persist for too long. And yet he did not give up. Again and again, masterfully avoiding the guard's hits. Changing its battle tactics, the golem tried to hypnotize Kim with magic. The vibration of mana washed over the hero, after which, the golem finally managed to throw Kim away from itself. But in reality, everything was not so simple. The final powerful blow caused the golem's hand to sink deep into the ground. This is exactly what Kim was trying to achieve. After all, the crystal on the golem's hand was not just a decoration, but a whole sensor for recognizing magic. Kim quickly got to his feet and rushed towards the crystal. Now, the hero only had to get there and send a signal to the crystal to stop the device. Luckily for him, the golem model was so old that it wouldn't have been difficult for Kim to pull off something similar. Running up to the guard and stretching out his hand, Kim directed magical energy into the crystal. The signal was received, and the golem's behavior began to change rapidly. The guard's hands hung down, his eyes went dark, and then he collapsed altogether. The hero remembered that even after giving the command, the golem was not completely turned off. In order to complete the process, Kim had to reach the guardian's core. Having climbed onto the golem's back, the hero walked quickly. The problem was that the core had to be removed first. Kim had no tools, but he also had no other choice. With all his might, he began to pull on the sheet metal, at some point tearing it off and revealing the glow. From there, the cannonball looked down on the hero in all its glory. Without hesitation, Kim put his hand towards the core. Grasping it tighter, he pulled it towards himself. A second later, the core was completely at the hero's disposal. The guardian golem itself was finally disabled. Kim even smiled, considering what he had done to be the simplest thing. At the same time, the narrative returned to the wounded K. Despite the abundance of wounds and lost blood, his hand suddenly flinched. Memories of his mother trying to persuade her son not to become a hunter came flooding back to him. In response to all the warnings, Kay smiled, declaring that there was nothing to worry about. And yet the mother was worried about her child. The woman couldn't shake the thought that her son could have died because of the choice he made. To calm her down, Kay took his mother by the hands. Looking into her eyes, he asked her not to worry, promising that he would become a great hunter. All Kay wanted was for his mother to believe in him. In response, the woman smiled and nodded, after which, Kay was already about to leave. Suddenly, a mother's voice called out to her son. Finally, the mother asked her son to take care of himself. The memories ended and Kay opened his eyes. With persistence, he began to rise. A minute later, swaying, he stood up like that. Immediately, his eyes froze. He saw a certain man standing on top of the fallen golem. Nothing answered the question of what exactly happened when Kay passed out. Trying to make sense of everything, Kay came to the conclusion that the strange man could not have been a simple civilian. This means that there was definitely a hunter on the golem. A moment later, the man on the golem threw the guardian core onto the ground. Next, I began to confidently approach Kay. Kay tried to do something, but no matter how hard the hunter tried, the body did not obey him. At a certain point, Kay stopped trying. After all, the hero was now standing opposite him. After a pause, Kay tried to call the stranger. In response, the hero extended his hand, asking if the hunter needed help. At least a day has passed since then. All the newspapers were full of headlines about the discovery of new gates. However, Kay was dissatisfied with what was presented there. The manager sitting opposite, on the contrary, did not understand what the hunter was dissatisfied with. After all, even though Kay was saved, he knew nothing about another hunter. The manager explained that even after conducting an investigation, no one could recognize Kay's savior from the description. Suddenly, Kay stood up from his seat, trying to demand something from the manager. But the manager refused to listen, hinting that anything else could harm Kay's career. He explained that if he showed weakness even once, as an A-rank hunter, Kay would become prey for others. So the manager suggested a move that would make it look like Kay had defeated the golem. Having listened to the end, the hunter clenched his fists tightly, further expressing that he would like to remain honest and grateful to his savior. Moreover, being confident that the unknown savior was not involved in anything bad, Kay justified his words by saying that otherwise no one would have helped the hunter. The manager sighed and resigned himself to Kay's arguments, after which he let him go. The hunter left the chief's office as quickly as possible. A minute later, the manager himself leaned back in his chair thoughtfully. He was extremely interested in the hunter who was stronger than Kay. At the same time, the hero was glued to his phone. As he scrolled through the internet, he found Earthlings truly intriguing. It just so happened that, having just returned from the dungeon, Kim accidentally unlocked his smartphone. Now, for a lot of hours, studying a wide variety of information there. So from now on, Kim had a lot of different information. It was from there that the hero emphasized that all gates had their own entry restrictions. As a result, in the country where Kim found himself, there was total control over hunters. The Hunters Association was in charge of everything, having a monopoly on the operation of the gates. But as for K, he was the best of the best. All this prompted the hero to think interesting thoughts. First of all, about the mandatory requirement to obtain a hunter's license. That's how Kim found himself on the training course. Being among many cadets, the hero was not at all interested in theory. At some point, Kim was handed some kind of device. As it turned out, Kim had no idea what he had gotten his hands on. Apparently, being the only one who doesn't know, the other cadets noticed the hero's strange behavior. Naturally, Kim didn't like the excessive attention to himself. The course officer had no choice but to tell Kim about the device in detail. When it became clear what the device was analyzing, the course leader released the monsters so that the devices could be aimed at them. After thinking for a bit, Kim did everything as he was told. The device worked, giving a description of the poisonous butterfly. The hero was interested in the fact that people use something similar to recognize enemies. A support officer standing nearby reminded him that the device could also search for objects. Now, I invite Kim to evaluate these functions of the device himself. The first thing the hero did was point it at the man, but he found nothing on him. Next, pointing the lens at the bush, Kim received a description of the fruit. At this point, it became clear to the hero exactly how the device worked. After which, Kim pointed the lens at his own shadow. Surprisingly, he discovered that the lens did not find anything useful in the shadows. After a couple of seconds, Kim realized that the device could detect objects that emitted mana. The hero discovered that the value of items was only determined by the amount of mana in them. Kim liked this method, even though it lacked precision. Dropping his hand into the ground, Kim once again became convinced that many things around him did not contain mana at all. Still, that didn't mean they weren't valuable. Moreover, the hero knew one secret of the Earth's cover. It served as an absorbent for absorbing magic itself. Kim had no idea why people didn't know such simple truths. After thinking for a while, something came to his mind. Suddenly, he asked the support officer for attention. Kim wanted to know exactly when the first awakened began to appear. Almost immediately, the support officer named the figure of 7 years, concluding this event with the opening of gates across the globe. The information received was unexpected for Kim. He couldn't even imagine that so little time had passed. While on the hero's homeworld, something similar would have taken tens of thousands of years. Finally, everything became clear to the hero. It just so happened that instead of magical abilities, the human species developed electronics. It was through technology that people compensated for their perfection. The hero found this evolutionary turn truly surprising. Later, Kim again thought about the Earth and its magical properties. Not long ago, the hero believed that by becoming a hunter, he would be able to instantly and fabulously become rich. Unfortunately for him, the truth of life turned out to be not so pleasant. The problems grew around Kim like a real lump. Because of this, before starvation caught up with the hero again, he decided to act. To achieve this goal, Kim dragged home a whole bag of land. Thanks to his own and acquired knowledge, Kim understood that through ordinary Earth, he could kill special monsters in special gates. However, with her rank, it was simply impossible for Kim to get there. Sighing and walking over to the mirror, he began to examine his imperfect body. Just then, Kim's phone beeped. This is how an emergency message from the authorities was displayed regarding the opening of new gates. Kim found the words about mandatory evacuation in the message quite strange. Not really understanding what they were talking about, the hero put on his clothes as quickly as possible. But Kim's desire to take a look was incredibly strong. Soon after going outside, the hero encountered crowds of people running away. Walking further and coming across the gates themselves, their size impressed Kim. Moreover, a huge creature just crawled out from there. Witnesses, including Kim, froze, watching her. Suddenly, the hero jumped up and started pushing aside the onlookers. Some people reacted quite sharply to Kim's behavior. This was especially true of the hero's facial expression. Without realizing it, his whole appearance irritated those he offended. Afterwards, the irritated man admitted that he was a hunter. Standing up, Kim admitted that he was also a hunter. Next, he doesn't say his F rank very confidently. Naturally, such a revelation caused laughter. For the first time in his life, Kim felt like he was being laughed at. But these emotions are gone, because now something is happening. The lizard that emerged from the portal roared loudly throughout the area. The military, who arrived at the scene, immediately opened fire on him. An avalanche of bullets fell upon the monster. The lizard reacted, and with a wave of its tail, knocked down one of the helicopters. The broken, flame-engulfed helicopter fell like a stone, subsequently collapsing and completely breaking. At the same time, a detachment of hunters arrived at the scene. Meanwhile, the lizard made its way into the interior of the tower. The monster opened its mouth, breaking the glass with its muzzle. The monster's long, tenacious tongue grabbed people. The monster jerked its tongue back sharply and pulled the people towards its mouth. But the monster's vile plans were not destined to come to fruition. The hunter, who arrived in time, cut off the tongue. The tongue was cut out and the captured people were released. From above, Kay observed the whole situation. Looking at the way the lizard was behaving, Kay assumed that he would now try to escape. Then, with his bow fully drawn, another hunter appeared. A shot was fired that hit a vulnerable area. The lizard's tail was injured, but the monster simply threw it off, after which the tower began to crawl down. Sensing the impending danger, the monster hurried. Right now, with his shield at the ready, Kay was making his move. Jumping from the helicopter like lightning, he plunged into the middle of the lizard's spine. His actions were precise and confident. Next, perform a circular strike with the shield. The lizard, thrown off balance, was now flying down towards the ground. Gritting his teeth stubbornly, Kay followed. Pushing off the walls of the tower, he struck again. In the end, the monster was defeated. Standing nearby, Kay tried to catch his breath. Nearby, the crowd screamed, captivated by the victory. Many of those present hoped to get an autograph from Kay. Luckily for them, a group of hunters was just moving towards them. Looking at Kay, the hero remembered that such hunters were rare. Kim's thoughts were interrupted by the crowd pressing in. Suddenly, the unexpected happened. The famous hunter suddenly took Kim by the hand. Kay was genuinely happy to meet his savior. Just in case, he even reminded him how the hero saved him. Recognizing Kay, the hero nodded his head in response. Immediately, many eyes turned to Kim. Among those present, Kay was preoccupied with something. After all, from the crowd, he spotted someone who was dissatisfied with the hero's presence. Subsequently, Kay decided to openly introduce himself to the hero. Kim, in turn, also gave his name. After which, Kay began to insist on one matter. After all, the high-ranking hunter had something to talk about. Thus, the scene shifted to the park. Having taken one of the benches, the characters started a not very comfortable conversation. Kay admitted that he had been worried since his rescue. Gradually, the hero understood what Kay was getting at, so he wasn't going to refuse help. Having spoken about a certain idea, Kay became eager to carry it out. Kim then showed a point on the phone's map. The hero was interested in going to the gates together. For this reason, the scene changed again. Walking in the middle of the gloomy forest, the hero found Kay worried. The hunter just laughed it off. Walking in step, Kay thought about his savior. There was one important detail that didn't fit into his head. But before, a little earlier, Kay willingly agreed to Kim's proposal. He believed that this way he would be able to learn some tricks. But the hero did not react to these words in any way, later stating that Kay was misunderstanding something. Next, showing the hunter his F-rank ID. In shock, Kay studied the ID. He stubbornly refused to believe what was written. Suddenly, he remembered one incident. Rumors were spreading that there was a special kind of hunter in the association. They were so powerful that they deliberately hid their rank. Kay came to the conclusion that the hero was one of those people. At some point, Kim announced that he had found something. Stopping before the edge of the earth, beyond which a whirlpool opened up. In the future fire of which terrible creatures lived. Looking closer, Kay recognized the monsters. Because of their passion for fire, they were called flamethrowers. Although we met them for the first time in a distant part of the world, the hero was pleasantly surprised by the hunter's knowledge. But it was now, from the whirlpool of flame, that the winged monsters began to break out. Spinning, they formed a ring above the characters' heads. Just then, Kim put his hand into his inside pocket. Seeing the movements from the hero, Kay became interested. However, Kim avoided answering. In fact, waiting for the monsters to get even closer. At the right hour, the hero scattered the collected earth. Immediately, some kind of reaction occurred. The flying creatures clearly encountered an unknown force. With their whole appearance, they portrayed terrible pain. The hero concluded that he had one effective remedy, whose effectiveness Kay could witness personally. Impressed, Kay started a conversation with Kim. The hunter didn't understand why he would use anything at all. He reminded that these monsters were extremely weak. However, he did not want to irritate Kim further. Changing the subject, he spoke about the meaning of awakening. Then the hero spoke about the powers that people were beginning to possess. From his words, it turned out that the hunters were superhumans. But Kim didn't like the fact that this power simply fell from the sky. So, the hero considered the people's strength undeserved. It followed from this that Kim did not want to rely on the abilities of the awakened ones. In fact, Kim hoped that Kay would believe this nonsense. Suddenly, a quiet voice came from Kay's direction. Unexpectedly, the hunter completely agreed. Kay was fully prepared to prepare for challenges without relying on his strength. Now, I have even more faith in Kim as my teacher. After which, Kay immediately covered his mouth. He remembered that he was a high-ranking hunter. Even standing next to him always gave him goosebumps. However, from Kim, there was absolutely no such effect. The hero really didn't like that his true abilities as a great magician were always belittled. Kay continued his speech, amazed at the hero's ability to hide his mana. It was extremely difficult for Kim to hear this address to him. But the legend worked, so Kim decided to go along with it. A little later at the diner, Kay hoped that the hero would invite him to hunt again. The hunter wanted to learn a lot, and besides, his team had fallen apart. The hero listened attentively to his words. The hero remembered very well that his comrades had once betrayed Kay. Overall, the hero was not against Kay's idea. The main condition, Kim stated, was that the hunter was obliged to defend himself. At the same time, he voiced to Kay what mistake he made during the battle with the golem. Kay was glad to hear useful advice, and, in general, a trustworthy attitude towards himself. A little later, by chance, their conversation turned to Kim's age. Without even giving him a chance to answer, Kay declared that he was only 22 years old. For the first time, the hero thought about how old that same man was. A question like this could have waited, since the first step was to exchange numbers. By chance, the hero felt his ID in his pocket, which he showed to Kay. It turned out that Kim was only 2 years older than the hunter. Using a fairly simple method, Kim calculated that he was 24. And yet there were no earlier memories present in the hero's mind, and the carrier's phone completely lacked any numbers. The hero had no idea what kind of life the owner of this body led. For the first time, Kim wondered if the body's owner might be hiding something. Why did he die and not even try to save himself? Meanwhile, somewhere else, a man woke up from his sleep. Listening to the news about the strange behavior of the gate, he lazily opened his eyes. His manner gave the impression that everything that was happening did not affect him in any way. After some time, Kay contacted the hero. Kim readily agreed to the offer to meet, because the hunter promised to show something unique. It turned out that they were talking about the recently opened gates, where hunters had priority access. Through rumors, Kim knew that a special plant had been found inside the gate that could possibly restore his magical powers. The hero saw the task itself as wildly simple. Additionally, Kim noted that quite a few onlookers and applicants for entry through the gates had gathered. Kay asked the hero not to pay attention to them, since most of them were most likely ordinary onlookers. It was then that the characters heard the roar of a car engine rushing at maximum speed. Interested, Kim glanced towards the noise. A couple of seconds later, the luxurious sports car stopped very close. A moment later, the sports car door opened. A man with interesting hair and an unusual hair color appeared from there. Many onlookers gasped, because Farid himself appeared. Even Ken himself looked at him with bated breath. After all, Farid was an S-rank holder, of which there were no more than a couple of people in the country. This information interested Kim. Taking a closer look, the hero could clearly see how much mana was actively flowing through Farid's body. The great hunter himself suddenly slowed down. Stopping, he suddenly looked towards Kim. Right now, Kay began to whisper in the hero's ear that even Farid's eyes were unusual. The only thing Kay didn't understand was why the great hunter started walking in their direction. Quickly approaching, Farid began to ask the hero about his name. A second later, the question was repeated, so Kim introduced himself. Around the same time, Kay awkwardly joined the conversation. In a menacing voice, Farid made it clear that he had not asked the upstart's opinion. Later, when the conversation turned to Kim's rank, the hero honestly named it. Hearing this, a smile appeared on Farid's face. Kim remained silent, but believed that the great hunter could reveal him. After all, even damaged lungs could testify to the creature's great magical potential. Having decided to play the role of a weakling, Kim was not even averse to showing his ID as proof. Suddenly, Farid launched into an unusual monologue about Kim's courage and the combination of that insignificant F rank. But Farid was not allowed to finish speaking, because Kay intervened again and began to lead the hero away. Kim was somewhat reluctant, as the plan was to visit an unusual gate. As Kay dragged the hero away, Kim himself stole a glance back. In all his beauty and power, Farid watched him go. Later, Kay started a conversation with the hero about how not recognizing Farid was a real crime. Moreover, the hunter warned that Farid did not have the best reputation. Rumor had it that the legendary hunter was a bully and had a criminal record. At this moment, Kim became interested in the story about Farid. Then, Kay began to tell about a tragic story that happened a long time ago, in one gate. Kim listened with bated breath to the story of how the crazy Farid killed a bunch of hunters because of his ego. But, be that as it may, the valuable time for studying the gates had run out. and the characters had yet to go their separate ways. Before parting, Kim remembered one detail. Stopping, he began to question Kay about Farid's strange eyes. And since, according to legend, they were dragons, it means they could be sold. Kay agreed with this conclusion, because according to history, Farid once swallowed dragon eyes. In this case, Kim could not help but inquire about the lungs. Kay began to explore the trophy store, and a minute later discovered dragon lungs. When Kay announced the price of $2.5 billion, the hero sighed heavily. After all, unlike Kay, such a price was unbearable for the hero. Something pinched in Kim's heart, so he decided not to listen to Kay. About half an hour later, Kim was riding in a taxi he had called. On the phone, he was actively studying information about Farid. The more information Kim learned about it, the more the great hunter frightened the hero. The hero was afraid that because of the eye contact, Farid could now latch onto him. Following the thoughtful thought, the roar of an engine was heard behind the taxi. Suddenly, the speeding sports car began to ram the taxi. There was a shaking inside the taxi, which caught Kim off guard. The sports car stubbornly did not lag behind, preparing for the next collision. Having chosen a good angle, the sports car rammed the taxi in the side. Having lost control, the taxi crashed into the barrier. The driver quickly came to his senses and inquired about the passenger's condition. Kim made some sounds but was unharmed. Quickly exiting the taxi, the driver began insulting and threatening the sports car owner for dangerous driving. At that very moment, the door of the sports car opened and a voice was heard apologizing. Without a hint of guilt on his face, Farid reported that he had simply mixed up the pedals. Coming out of the taxi, Kim now saw him too. The great hunter walked quickly towards the hero, asking him for contacts. While Kim was pondering his answer, the taxi owner began to complain and demand reimbursement of expenses. In response, the great hunter easily pulled out a wad of bills. The taxi driver's behavior quickly changed, and now he blessed Farid. Afterwards, Farid began stubbornly demanding that Kim take his phone number so that he could cover the costs of treatment in the future. Not really understanding what the bully was getting at, Kim readily agreed. Farid silently began to enter Kim's information into his contacts. He himself was a difficult person, born into a wealthy family. Since childhood he was spoiled, poorly brought up, and had a penchant for harming others. However, there was one extremely interesting detail in Farid's biography concerning his inheritance. As soon as his parents died in one of the dungeons, Farid sold off the shares of the family companies. All this was so suspicious that people even considered Farid to be the killer of his relatives. And yet, apart from rumors, this story had no other confirmation. Subsequently, Farid started a conversation with Kim about really paying work. He hoped that the hero would at least be interested in listening. The calculation was correct, so Kim willingly agreed to find out everything. Then, Farid directly stated that the hero should go work for him and earn real money. But in his thoughts, Kim already considered Farid's proposal to be even more absurd. He still believed that the great hunter had seen potential in him. All the hero needed to do to conquer the planet was to awaken his magic. So, for now, Kim refused to explain his inability to pass through high-ranking gates. Unexpectedly, Farid agreed with this, as if understanding Kim's misfortune. Suddenly, Farid became more specific, because his proposal concerned Kim's upgrade. The hero hastened to apologize, because he had misunderstood the meaning of Farid's previously spoken words. Smiling, Farid believed that from that moment on, Kim was willing to cooperate. Before giving the go-ahead, Kim wanted to know what Farid saw in him. The great hunter fell silent and grinned slyly. Then his face began to radiate clearly ill intentions. Later, the action moved to a diner. There, meeting with Kay, the hero confessed that he had run away from Farid. Kay listened to the hero's story with great interest. He even thanked Kim, because he had drawn Farid's attention to himself. Kim knew that running away was a better idea than seeking police protection from the great hunter. After leaving the establishment, the characters began to walk down the street. Kay told the hero about how their country became the first in the efficiency of clearing the gates. Kim himself was not delighted with these conversations, believing that Kay was overly talkative. However, when the topic touched upon the gates, the hero was all ears. A fair amount of thought in Kim's head was occupied by information about the gate. The Awakened also occupied a certain niche there. Thanks to the internet, Kim knew that the Earth had a solid shell, so drawing mana from the planet's depths was a difficult task. But despite a lot of different data, no one knew what exactly those gates were. For some unknown reason, terrifying creatures hostile to humans would emerge from the gates every now and then. Such questions tormented the hero considerably. From these deepest thoughts, the hero was pulled out by Kay. Kim honestly said that he thought about the meaning of the gate. After all, in the whole story with the gate, the hero saw some kind of catch, even a trap. Kim described the people who entered the gate as curious rats, who were supposedly specially lured there. The arguments presented by the hero found a response in K. At that very moment, Kim felt an uncontrollable vibration beneath him. The hero became wary. Seeing that Kim's behavior had changed, the hunter inquired about the situation. But the unbridled power was now reaching its boiling point, until finally a magical vortex formed around Kim. With terrible force, he pushed K. Subsequently, a bright column of energy burst into the sky where Kim was. Gritting his teeth, Kim couldn't do anything about this flow of magic. Subsequently, an impenetrable veil covered the hero's vision. It is unknown when, but the hero's eyes slowly opened. He was stunned to find himself in a completely different place, now standing in the middle of a huge corridor. Kim's first thought was that he had somehow ended up inside the gate. Having no other choice, Kim began to move forward. The situation was difficult, because in the current state of affairs, the hero was completely unarmed. At some point, Kim slowed down. He found himself right in front of a strange kind of gate. Between them and Kim, something like a tombstone was placed on the floor. Bending down to take a closer look, right then and there, the hero felt something was wrong. On one side, someone was staring at Kim. Footsteps were heard from the other side, and someone else came out. One of the uninvited guests was Farid himself. But there was another one whom Kim did not know. Slowly, they both began to approach Kim. Standing opposite each other, Farid greeted the hunter with the sword, whose name was Jason. From their conversation, Kim clearly sensed that the hunters were definitely not getting along. Suddenly, Farid decided to question the hero about his knowledge of Jason. Having lived in the body for no more than 2 weeks, it is clear that Kim knew no one. So, as the second most powerful hunter in the country, Farid introduced Jason to the hero. Afterwards, Farid introduced Kim himself. Now, even from Jason, the hero experienced an unpleasant, intense gaze. Jason no longer wished to chatter, making it clear that everyone had been thrown into this place by the same manifestation. To Kim's interest, Jason summoned a device from his hand. A little later, Jason made it clear that everyone was inside the gate. Kim looked at the gate rank record with utter surprise. It was so high that the hero's phone broke after a couple of seconds. Farid was also worried about his device while Jason was looking at the tombstone. He read aloud the inscription that mentioned the key and faith. Afterwards, their general attention turned to the gates themselves. Considering them to be the only way out, Jason pressed his hands against the gate. With all his strength, he began to press on them. But they didn't move even a millimeter. So, Jason began to call Farid for help. Farid didn't want to bother, but he admitted that there was no other choice. Having properly warmed up his arm, Farid swung. Jason watched his actions closely. Farid cast a similar glance. Next, Jason stepped up and used magic. A terrible force struck the door, partially seeping through Jason's fingers. Having accumulated magic, Farid also made his move. Having gained speed, he delivered a powerful blow to the doors. Kim stood behind, watching the spectacle with bated breath. The hero considered the abilities of those two hunters to be truly astonishing. But even the manifestation of such great power did not allow the gate to be opened. Quite tired and drenched in sweat, Farid admitted that brute force would not open the door. It was now that Kim spoke up. He made it clear that only one last clue remained to be tested. Farid stared with interest at the stone lion that the hero approached. The more the great hunter looked at the sculpture of the beast, the more he wanted to do something. Unable to contain himself, he admitted that he would like to put his hand in the lion's mouth. Afterwards, he began to wait for a response from his companions. Whether it was Kim or Jason, both remained silent. However, the hero understood that sooner or later, without finding a way out, everyone would face death by starvation. Suddenly, Jason approached the stone lion. Without hesitation, he thrust his hand into the mouth of the stone predator. Some hidden mechanisms immediately began to move, after which the gates themselves opened. Meanwhile, Kim noticed that Jason was behaving strangely. After all, there were now 2 punctures on that one's hand. With a hint of panic in his voice, the hunter reported that the lion had sucked his blood. Jason admitted that he couldn't pull his hand back for a long time. So, due to his stubbornness, the hunter got seriously injured. The situation was unnecessarily simple, so the hero felt there was some kind of catch. But for now, the characters have gone to a new area that has opened up. After some time on the road, Farid cursed. The characters arrived at the next gate, next to which was another lion. Jason spoke up, making it clear that there was no time to waste. Boldly and immediately, he stuck his hand into the lion's mouth. Taking the rap for everyone, he opened the gates. The character's path has resumed. A little later, they all came across the same scene again. Meanwhile, Kim was becoming increasingly doubtful, as such obstacles on the way were trivial. Besides, now Jason asked Farid to help with opening the doors. Jason was worried that the third time he sucked blood, he would completely lose consciousness. However, Farid was not particularly eager to lose blood. He hoped that Jason would finish the job on his own. Only now did it begin to dawn on the hunter that Farid had no desire to work in a team at all. Farid chuckled, reminding him of how high his rank was. This answer did not satisfy Jason, so he again demanded teamwork in a more forceful manner. Farid became interested in these words, wanting to know what could happen in case of refusal. The situation was rapidly escalating, and Kim realized that the hunters could clash with each other at any moment. Farid did not retreat, but now he changed his rhetoric, now hinting at Kim as another hunter in their group. The hero swallowed hard, because in such gates, as a rule, no more than half of the people who entered survived. Such gates were deadly, as often someone had to be sacrificed. Kim didn't want to admit it, but he felt that death was near. At the same time, Jason expressed doubts about Farid's ideas. But he did not finish his speech, because he became distracted. The three of them held their breath and stared at something. From the depths of the dungeon, something was coming out towards the hunters with heavy steps. The mystical wolf stubbornly walked towards them. Kim didn't understand anything, because in such dungeons, enemies shouldn't have been encountered. At the same time, the approaching wolf bared its teeth and growled, then carrying out a pounce. Unable to resist in any way, Kim covered himself with his hands in fear. Jason stepped forward to intercept the mystical wolf. Kim closed his eyes and froze, clearly hearing the sound of the sword ringing. Jason jumped out in front of the hero and struck in motion. His magical attack dealt a whole lot of damage to the monster. Opening his eyes, Kim studied with interest the magic used by the hunter. Turning to Farid, the hero began to think about his abilities. Looking at the great hunter, Kim's gaze independently jumped beyond him. After all, now a new beast was rushing towards Farid, growling. With each passing second, the mystical monster became closer and closer. Having finally made the leap, it intended to grab the great hunter by the throat. At the very last moment, Farid noticed the danger. Instantly, a magical aura flared up around him. He twisted and struck with his fist, pinning the monster to the floor. Kim held his breath, watching Farid's skills in action. Having destroyed the enemy, Farid himself was not particularly impressed. Jason urged not to be brave, because he was bringing something else closer. Now, in the midst of the walls surrounding the passages, unusual images were forming. The walls seemed to soften and clawed paws gradually appeared through them. Then the growling faces of wolves appeared. About a minute later, the barrier burst and dozens of monsters poured out of the walls. Restlessly, in waves, they entered the room near the gate. The first mystical wolves confidently stood on their paws and prepared to attack. A situation arose where the characters found themselves in a very real environment. Growling and drooling, the wolves slowly closed the ring. The hunters stood with their backs to each other. Even though Jason asked to cover the rear, Farid made it clear that he wanted to show off. A few moments later, the toothy maws rushed towards the trio. At that very moment, the hunter's magic came into effect. Farid was the first to administer a notable slap on the back of the head. Jason wielded his sword, cutting down creatures left and right. Even though the wolves' ranks were thinning, they had no intention of retreating. Seeing this, Farid mobilized even more magical powers. As he prepared his fist, he focused an unprecedented amount of power into it. Having waited until the wolves had unintentionally gathered in a crowd, he fired a beam in their direction. The long battle continued. Following Farid, Jason also prepared his own unique attack. At the right moment, he makes about 100 swings of the sword in front of him. As before, the hero watched all this silently. In his mind, he was in a rare state of admiration. Even though he didn't show it, the fight was difficult for Jason. The problem was the early loss of blood, which was causing the hunter's stamina to rapidly decrease. Out of nowhere, he stared at the stone lion again. At the moment when another wolf jumped on him, Jason realized something. But being an experienced hunter, he easily eliminated the threat. After another victory, I only became more confident in the conclusion. After some time, the last of the wolves was defeated. Farid admitted that there were more creatures than he had ever seen in his life. Standing behind them, Kim continued his observations. Now I have seen firsthand what kind of power was hidden within the S-rank hunters. All this meant was that Kim's land grab was now becoming a difficult task. It was now that Jason spoke, attracting everyone's attention. He noticed the changed color of the eyes of the lion statue. The hunter believed that if he didn't offer the lion blood in time, he wouldn't be able to avoid a wave of monsters. Right behind his words, new wolf faces began to emerge from the wall. Kim was the first to see this danger. And so, he warned the hunter at the top of his voice. Instantly, Jason made a sideways movement. He moved his hand, piercing the monster completely with a sure blow. Right after that, Farid chuckled loudly. With interest, he started talking about the time limits Jason had discovered. These questions were interrupted by a new wave of wolves that poured through the walls. Unable to defend himself, Kim held his hands out in fear. Seeing that the wolves were aiming at the hero, Jason rushed to his aid. Realizing that the situation was getting worse, Farid also sprang into action. Against the backdrop of the endless battle, he accelerated, heading towards the stone lion. As he walked, he prepared his hand. Once close enough, he put his hand into the lion's mouth. The stone fangs immediately sank into Farid's flesh. Immediately, the entire horde of wolves scattered into dark clots. Instantly, a deathly silence fell over the entire arena. The sacrifice was made, and the passage was open. And yet the hunters were not sure that Kim would be able to help in future situations. In his mind, the hero thanked Jason for saving him, and also for not allowing Farid to sacrifice Kim. In any case, their journey continued. After some time, Jason felt a strange shortness of breath. He looked tired, and sweat kept streaming down his face. Running up to the hunter, the hero began to support him. Even though Jason tried to hide his weakness, Kim could clearly see how the hunter's strength was leaving him. The only consolation the hero saw was that Farid had entered the process of opening the doors. At some point, Farid suggested that everyone stop for a minute or two. The great hunter believed that the process of passing through the gates was delayed, which meant that a mistake had been made somewhere. Jason did not agree with this conclusion, believing that Farid was simply stalling for time. He openly warned that Farid could stab him in the back. Having heard this, the great hunter suggested that the others open the doors. However, after Jason's stubborn gaze, he hastened to change his mind. As he walked towards the lion, he also reported that the incident for which he was accused had been misunderstood by many. Farid insisted that he was not a crazy maniac, yet he understood why he had been given such a bad reputation, thus veiledly leading to mistrust on the part of Jason. After which, proving his good intentions, Farid again put his hand into the lion's mouth. Such speeches on the part of Farid seemed more than reasonable to the hero. Kim even began to doubt the rumors that were circulating about the great hunter. At the same time, after another loss of blood, Farid looked unwell. He asked not to worry about himself, because he had a couple of regeneration potions in reserve. Nodding approvingly, Jason suggested continuing on his way. Kim watched closely as both hunters rapidly weakened. It was then that the hero's gaze wavered. After all, while swinging, Farid took out one of his bottles of potions from his inventory. Then, with all his might, he smashes the bottle on Jason's head. Jason lost his balance with a cry. Then his eyes rolled back and the hunter collapsed to the floor. While Kim was at a loss, Farid himself reasoned that this method worked properly. Finally, the hero dared to call out to Farid. Unexpectedly, Farid started talking about some gate in Europe. While telling the story, Farid made it clear that the gates there were very similar and that a sacrifice had to be made to pass through. Finally, it dawned on the hero that Farid was ready to do anything to survive. Having lifted Jason from the floor, Farid wanted to complete his plan. Kim could only resign himself and not draw attention to himself if Farid's conclusions were true. Not really wanting to, he decided to silently support him. Besides, Kim could not allow himself to get hurt. A minute later, suddenly, Kim grabbed Farid's hand. Under the weight of his conscience, he offered to be the next one to open the doors. Kim wanted not so much to make his contribution as to save Jason. Farid himself was not against it, being confident that the dungeon would soon end. But as soon as the trio reached the next gate, it swung open on its own. Their movement stopped abruptly. They watched not only the opening doors, but also the new statue. None of them expected that the dungeon would just end like that. Looking at the statue, Farid recognized it as the Iron Maiden. Gradually, the characters began to approach the statue. Meanwhile, Farid admitted that he was wrong about the bloodthirstiness of the dungeon. Still, he was afraid of Jason's complaint when he woke up. At this point, Kim approached the statue, taking the decoration from her hands. The hero looked at the golden hoop with interest. Afterwards, he informed Farid that with the help of the received item, he could beg Jason's forgiveness. Farid, however, was not so confident in what Kim had said. He was afraid not so much of Jason, but of the consequences from the association. Besides, the body would have been absorbed by the gate itself anyway. The great hunter saw the witness as the only obstacle to killing Jason. Seeing how tense Kim was, Farid burst out laughing. After saying that he would not kill him, but would demand one favor, Farid gripped the hero's shoulder tightly and asked Kim to take the blame for the blow to Jason. Suddenly, the story took a digression, telling how Farid changed his vision. This happened thanks to a rare item that Farid knocked out of the green dragon. The item was very special and had a lot of functions. In addition to excellent vision, even allowing one to see the true rank of the awakened. It was this vision that Farid used when he first met Kim. Every now and then in his daily life, Farid applied his gaze in every possible way. As a rule, just by looking, the great hunter would drive the other person into panic. However, for some reason this never happened with Kim. So now, trying hard in his speeches, he tried to convince Kim to take the blame on himself. After thinking about it, the hero decided to find out what would happen if he refused. Farid chuckled in response, hinting at unpleasant consequences. Out of the blue, Kim decided to agree to the condition put forward. Farid's expression changed. The hero agreed too easily. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't bring even a drop of fear to Kim's face. Farid seriously thought about what motives Kim himself had for this. He quickly recalled the hero's words, where he confessed that he could no longer enter the gates of the highest rank. Farid feared that Kim was lying about his rank, deliberately understating it. Now Farid understood why he had been unable to see the hero's potential. But before getting to the bottom of the truth, Farid approved of Kim's choice. Then he turned around and announced that it was time for everyone to get out. Even though Kim had made a vile deal, his soul was uneasy. Thus, the three of them headed towards the exit of the gate. After passing through the portal, the first thing that struck my eyes was the bright sunlight. Kim closed his eyes and looked around. He found himself right inside the fence, behind which a crowd of people were crowded. It was the first time Kim had seen such a crowd. A second later, reporters began peppering Kim with questions. The most cunning reporter broke through the cordon, trying to get comments from the hero. But Kim was more concerned about why he ended up here. Looking back, he saw portals lined up behind him. The next moment, the crowd froze. Now Farid emerged from the portal, carrying Jason on his back. For many, this scene was shocking, especially when it came to Jason's unconscious state. Immediately, a representative of the association approached Farid with an important question. She persistently wanted to know the details of what had happened. The woman's first thought was that Jason had fallen victim to the gate mechanism. After a short silence, Farid nodded towards Kim as the man who had knocked out Jason. The hero remained silent, although he did not expect the situation to develop any differently. Besides, the woman from the association didn't really believe this nonsense. Kim was mentally glad that at least the association representative hadn't fallen for the lie. Then Farid called out loudly to Kim. In front of everyone, he asked the hero to tell the truth. The hero closed his eyes, realizing that he had no choice. The woman from the association began to wait attentively for an explanation from Kim. After waiting a little, Kim admitted that it was he who attacked Jason. The words he said naturally came as a shock to everyone. The hero added to his revelation that he would personally apologize to Jason. And yet, the association representative still didn't really believe this story. At this moment, Farid made sounds of pain. In full view of everyone, he began to hunch over and bow to the ground. Farid tried to show something to the woman from the association as vividly as possible, deliberately pretending to be a weakened hunter, trying to prove that Kim was to blame for everything. The hero himself guessed that Farid was simply putting on an act. The scene that was played out seriously intrigued the reporters. And then, one after another, they began to bombard Kim with new questions. All cameras turned to the hero, waiting for his comments. At some point, the hero's lips moved. He clearly agreed with the accusations. After some time, the newspaper with this news was in someone's hands. Jason, who had come to his senses, was full of indignation at the truth he had learned. In any case, a new day had dawned, and the action took place in a cafe. While having breakfast there, Kay started talking about the news. Not really trusting the tabloids, he wanted to know if Kim had really managed to knock out Jason. Kim didn't answer right away, because now he understood why Kay was so urgently looking for a meeting. In the end, he still gave a positive answer. Be that as it may, Kay was glad that the hero was not hurt at all. At that very second, the hero's phone began to vibrate from a ringing tone. Kim willingly answered the number, which was unknown to him. As it turned out, it was Jason himself who called the hero. The call was quite delicate, so Kim asked Kay not to be distracted from eating. Getting up from the table, he made it clear to Jason that he was going to apologize. But the hunter was more concerned not with these little details, but with what had happened itself. The tone in which Jason asked his questions seemed a little strange to Kim. Jason admitted that he had almost completely lost his memories of the events at the gate. Still, he didn't believe that Kim could have carried out the attack. From Jason's words, it became clear that he did not lose consciousness instantly. In the very last moments, having managed to make out someone. In this regard, the hunter asked Kim to explain. The situation was becoming increasingly unpleasant, and absurd news kept adding fuel to the fire. Kim was worried, and one of the options for getting out of the situation was to confess about Farid. And yet, the hero was not sure that Jason himself could be trusted. After all, Jason's reputation was only slightly less terrifying than Farid's. Overall, Kim wasn't sure he would be protected, and especially that Jason will personally be able to deal with Farid. And then, nevertheless, Kim decided to take the blame. Along the way, he tells a ridiculous story about how Kim tried to protect Jason. The hunter considered Kim's excuses, and even the promise of some kind of apology in the form of a reward, to be sheer mockery. Jason considered it a sheer insult to try to settle everything with a ridiculous bribe. The hunter became inflamed, realizing that they simply wanted to sacrifice him. Additionally, accusing Kim of conspiring with Farid. And anyway, Jason didn't really believe that Kim had an F rank. Silently, the hero listened to this entire avalanche of words. Besides, Jason himself has already spoken out. At the end, warning that the hero will be watched. At this point, the hunter ended his call. After the end of such a heated conversation, a woman entered the room and made herself known. Obediently, the woman handed over some materials into the hunter's hands. Additionally, the woman made it clear that the conflict had not reached the public eye. With interest, Jason studied the articles that were written about him after the incident. The woman was somewhat worried that the hunter had become quite carried away by commenting on the articles. But Jason was more concerned with something else, concerning the truth about the invulnerability of high-ranking hunters. He sincerely feared that this news could disturb civil peace. At some point, the woman distracted Jason again by talking about Kim. Jason didn't really believe the story about Kim's F rank. After all, if that were the case, Farid could have easily killed both of them and not even have any suspicions about himself. There was a lot about Kim that confused Jason, especially his gaze. The hunter described that look as alien and inhuman. Jason was afraid that the hero had simply falsified his rank. Openly asking the association to recheck Kim's rank, the story then moved on to explain the topic of hunter skills. This is what the superpowers that the awakened had were called. At least one skill, but every awakened one always had. The peculiarity was that no hunter could go beyond the initial element. The situation was different for Kim, as a soul that had mastered magic to perfection. This is exactly the kind of creature the hero saw himself as. But solving the problems of magic was complicated by attracting undue attention to itself. But even under pressure, Kim did not give up trying to strengthen his magical connection. Due to lung problems, the hero could not use magic. And in order to get around this restriction, Kim had to raid the gate again for some ingredients. With these thoughts, the hero now stood in front of the Tower of Magic. Suddenly, a concierge appeared on the street and began to chase Kim away. The concierge laughed when Kim announced he had made an appointment. Not trusting the F-rank man, the concierge escorted Kim out as quickly as possible. Just then, someone called out to the hero. It was Ken who apologized for being late. The concierge was confused, because the F-rank man enjoyed Ken's favor. Instantly changing his face and feelings, he greeted Ken. In the midst of this friendly atmosphere, the hero felt a little awkward. A minute later, Ken and Kim were invited inside. They walked briskly inside the tower. The man who met the characters apologized for the misunderstanding that Kim encountered. After which, he called for them to follow him, thus presenting the hero with the world of a hunting guild, where magic ruled everything. Ahead, the characters had some kind of meeting. The woman at the reception desk readily handed over the pass that led to the upper floors of the tower. Next, pointing to the elevator for ascent. Sighing, Ken urged the hero to follow him. Once they entered the elevator, their long climb began. A couple of minutes later, on the right floor, the elevator doors opened. The hero walked forward and was taken aback. Now, he could not understand at all why the street was so close. After all, Kim was absolutely sure that the elevator had taken them to the 60th floor. Ken spoke up, guessing that the hunters were being tested. Ken hesitantly started talking about the tower's guildmaster as having a bad temper. Ken told a story about how players often found themselves trapped in a labyrinth at the whim of the guildmaster. He assured that you would have to get to the top floor on your own. There was nothing else to do, so Kim headed for the nearest exit. Opening the door, he was again struck by surprise. After all, now their path led them to an underground parking lot. Then, suggesting that Ken return to where they came from. Having found a staircase, the characters began to climb it. The hero was not very happy with the fact that, according to Ken, apparently no one had ever passed this test. And in general, the hero considered such a hobby to be an extremely strange manifestation. Nevertheless, the meeting with the creator of the labyrinth excited Kim. Streams of magic flowed everywhere, as if Kim had returned to his homeland again. After some time on the road, Ken began to worry about the success of the venture. The hero calmed him down, and besides, he still had some aces up his sleeve. Unexpectedly, Kim put his hand on the wall. After standing like this for some time, the hero discovered how simple the magical structure in this place was. Ken gasped when the hero announced that he had found a way up. To do this, Kim first asked to send the elevator cabin up. The hero assured that this was the only way to find the way. Even though the hunter didn't understand the idea, he agreed to help. Next, by pressing a button, the hunter called the elevator. The cabin arrived, the doors opened, and Kim stuck his hand inside. After which, he pressed the button, sending the elevator cabin to the floor above. Then for some reason, the hero asked Ken to move away. Kim himself suddenly accelerated. Then with all his might, he kicked the elevator shaft doors. The impact resulted in a harsh metallic roar. Ken froze, but the hero, on the contrary, radiated confidence. After all, with his action, he opened up an entire hidden space. Immediately, Kim demanded that the hunter not lag behind. Kim explained that everything in this place is connected to the gate. After which, the hero boldly stepped into the elevator shaft. To Kei's shock, the hero took a leap into the unknown. As he fell, the glow from the magic enveloped Kim's face. Soon, the elevator shaft, and indeed anything else, disappeared from view. Now the hero found himself in a free and long flight. Without regulating this process in any way, its position in space was constantly changing. All this continued until one glow was replaced by another. Suddenly, Kim's feet stepped onto the hard floor. Almost immediately, Kei also fell out of the portal. The hunter was impressed by how long and scary the flight was. But then, those who arrived at this place were greeted by laughter. A gorgeous-looking woman was happy to greet those who were walking through the labyrinth for the first time. Kim's method of passing impressed her. Then, resting her palms on the table, the woman announced that the freebie had come to an end. Then, introducing herself to Esther, the owner of the tower, as their opponent. But first, ask your guests to sit down. Looking at Kim, she wanted to get to know him better. After all, the hero managed to get through the labyrinth, whose level was set to the most difficult. In his mind, Kim admired the lady, but out loud he imagined her. Subsequently, Esther suggested to the hero that they not be enemies. But Kim didn't really understand what she was getting at so veiledly. Moreover, they constantly call Kim a rare specimen gifted in analytics. At the same time, Kei whispered in the hero's ear that the seductress was a hunter with rare skills. The hero already knew some of what he heard, since he had found a lot of information about the tower on the internet. The more the hero learned about the human world, the more he became convinced that most Earthlings had mastered only primitive magic. Only a small fraction of them, like Esther, managed to master complex and deep magic. In any case, Kim pretended that he knew nothing about Esther. The seductress laughed, now about to change the subject. Finally, the conversation turned to the purpose of the character's visit. Kim admitted that he wanted to enter one of the guild gates. The hero explained that he was able to get to this meeting only thanks to Kei. To prove his words, Kim showed his personal hunter's card. At first, Esther was surprised, but then she declared that low rank was the curse of all analysts. The seductress then began to state that if the purpose of the visit was to obtain materials from the gate, it was impossible to take them. Besides, Esther couldn't allow outsiders to take the materials that the guild needed anyway. Such a ban was news to Kim. Esther asked the hero to understand that she could not allow another guild to establish a monopoly over the gates. She agreed to meet Kim halfway, only on the condition that someone higher up would ask for it. Not being one to haggle, Esther wanted to hear the exact price immediately at their next meeting. After listening to the end, Kim turned to Esther in a low tone. The hero stated that he was not a member of any guilds. Ken suddenly jumped up from his seat, confirming Kim's words. Additionally, Kim stated that he was not an analyst, as Esther claimed. In general, the hero described the situation only as a personal request. Besides, the hero had no intention of doing his work for free. Having finished speaking, he again heard mischievous female laughter. And Esther herself had changed in a strange way. Esther looked down at Kim, and for some reason licked her lips appetizingly. Kim completely did not understand the hints that the seductress was emitting. Esther then banged the table, having realized that Kim was an illegal hunter. With a breath, she addressed the hero by name. Unexpectedly, the woman was ready to let Kim into the gate, but on the condition that he would work for her. Ken began to whisper in the hero's ear, convincing him of the importance of his choice. Kim understood that people like that were important in the human world. Then suddenly Esther held out her palm in front of Kim. She tried to entice the hero with a reward of as much as 500 million. What he heard took Kim's breath away. At the same time, Esther was full of indignation that she had not managed to win Ken over to her side in time. Meanwhile, the hero imagined how much food he could buy with the money from Esther. The seductress continued to entice Kim, promising that the workload would be light. And yet, the hero wanted to make sure of the honesty of Esther's intentions. The seductress willingly confirmed the truth of her words. Kim closed his eyes, feeling like he had grabbed his luck by the tail. He came to his senses when he realized Esther's words about work. In Kim's mind, the word work brought back terrible memories of the past. Without wanting to, he mentally transported himself back to that period. After all, not long ago, Kim started the reincarnation of his soul only in order to escape from work. Then, due to overwork and overwork, the hero lived in utter hell. So there was no way Kim could return to such humiliating activities. Seeing that the hero was making up his mind, Esther took out a certain paper and moved it towards him. The seductress was not averse to hiring the hero's friend, Ken himself, and yet Kim could not give his approval, showing with his whole appearance that he was not interested in the offer, having decided to explain his decision by the lack of intention to join the guild. Hearing this, Esther's gaze dimmed. Now she wanted to hear if Kim's words were final. After all, if the hunters had rejected the offer, they would have had to pay to enter the gate. The hero crossed his fingers and started talking about an agreement. Standing up, he offered to exchange some of his knowledge. Kim insisted that the proposal would save the tower. Afterwards, he began to walk around the room. Kim was sure that the tower barrier was not cheap. Esther listened to him with boredom, and yet she had some interest in the proposal. Then Kim took out a bag of soil and put it on the table. Looking at this, Ken remembered how the hero defeated the monsters. Kim himself naturally doubted his choice. But looking at Esther, he understood that sooner or later, people would reveal the secret. As a result, Esther doubted Kim's intentions as simple as simply entering the gate. Their conversation dragged on, and they even brought tea into the room. Kim constantly assured that he would not lay claim to anything inside the gate. He asked that the situation be considered only as help for himself. Hours passed and evening was approaching. One of the tower's employees addressed Esther. He asked if everything went well. Esther let out a long moan as she sipped her tea. She then stated that she was playing a joke on the guests. The clerk hoped that Esther had not cursed the visitors. Moreover, the seductress liked to do this often. Esther laughed, declaring that she had not sent the worst upon them. As it turned out, the characters were actively sneezing for the next minute. Esther justified her curse by saying that no one had sneezed before. Next, she recalled how exactly it all happened. At a certain point, the curse was activated. But the next moment after that, Kim stared at the woman. There was a long period of eye contact between them. It was a piercing gaze, looking right through. Esther froze, believing that her antics had been discovered. Esther's story led to the fact that the curse didn't work. A little later, a second employee appeared with a report on the sand. It came as a surprise to Esther that Kim wasn't lying. So now she wanted to know as much as possible about Kim. Kim frightened Esther and at the same time attracted her. A little more time passed and night fell. Not far from the tower, Kim felt sick. It turned out that the hero didn't tolerate coffee very well. Not knowing anything about this drink, Kim drank it in one gulp. As soon as the taste touched his tongue, the hero remembered the terrible canned food from his world. The hero almost vomited from disgust, and the opinion about Esther was completely destroyed. Moreover, it was at that moment that their gazes met. However, Kim did not publicly admit his aversion to coffee. As the new manager of the body, Kim instilled his own tastes in it. Skillfully, he manipulated the body as he wished. Perhaps because of all these factors, the curse did not work. Later, having moved away a little, Kay started a conversation with the hero. Their conversation turned to the strange sand that Kim had given Esther. Ken couldn't understand how Kim could part with such a valuable thing so easily. Later, Ken learned that the hero was basically useless and had no emotions. Kim described his actions as nothing more than an attempt to present himself better. Ken shuddered when he heard this. He even thought that the hero liked Esther. Kim quickly made it clear that nothing of the sort had happened. The question then remained, what did Kim want to find? The answer was not given, and a new day dawned. Kim woke up with pain all over his body. He stretched and decided to check how dry something was. It just so happened that behind the scenes, Kim visited Esther's gate. There, a pack of monsters attacked the characters. Ken, as always, was at the forefront. Thanks to his efforts, the monsters were defeated. While Ken was fighting, the hero was collecting mana boosters. That's how he got his hands on the demonic fairy wings. Kim believed that the hardest part was behind him. The hero felt himself one step closer to domination. But first, Kim needed to get some food. Opening the refrigerator, he suddenly became distracted. Someone was knocking on the apartment door very persistently. The hero had no idea about the two big guys behind her. Kim only hoped that it wasn't someone who had known the host in life. Opening the door, he met people from the Hunters Association. Unexpectedly for himself, he met Unmi again. The girl respectfully asked the hero to leave the apartment. Unmi apologized for such an unexpected visit. While talking, she stealthily looked inside Kim's dwelling. He went on to explain that the hero was suspected of rank substitution. In his apology, Eunmi made it clear that the test would have to be repeated. If he refused, Eunmi threatened that Kim would be taken away by force. The hero remained silent, although he was upset that he was unable to eat. A couple of minutes later, he was already riding inside the van. There was total silence inside the car. Although quite nervous, the hero kept himself in hand, but the way he was restrained still attracted attention. It just so happened that the anonymous complaint about Kim was responded to. Eunmi took on the matter personally, studying the career of a hunter. The database indicated that Kim had only passed through the gate once. This information aroused a lot of suspicion in Eunmi, but Eunmi was unable to find anything more specific at the time. A lot of time has passed, and not so long ago, everything changed. The news was full of Kim's attack on the hunter Jason. It was this news that moved the story forward. Eunmi was surprised by how easily Kim took his arrest. Already in the laboratory, Kim admitted that he had no money. Eunmi reassured the hero, guaranteeing that if the falsification was not confirmed, the money would not be taken. Kim sighed, a little worried. Next, he looked at the testing stand. Only now did Kim realize that the test was done by breathing. The hero calmed down, remembering that the carrier was a heavy smoker. However, Eunmi was leading Kim to a completely different piece of equipment. As it turned out, the new method ignored damaged lungs. Soon, Kim came out to a certain car. Next, the hero was forcibly grabbed by the arms. Confidently, Kim was dragged towards the device. Kim was in complete despair, fearing the worst. After about half an hour, the test was finished. Before she even began to properly examine the data, Eunmi hoped that Kim would not turn out to be a fraud. The hero remained stubbornly silent, engaged in self-reflection. Confused in his thoughts, he did not know how he could explain his magic. But most of all, Kim was afraid of the exorbitant fine. A minute later, Eunmi announced that Kim's rank had not changed. Hearing this, Kim exhaled loudly. Moreover, learning that the hunter's rank grew up to a certain point, Kim confirmed that the carrier was always an F-rank carrier. This means that the matter did not depend on smoking at all. However, Kim did not understand why the golem could see him so poorly. It began to dawn on Kim that the golem did not perceive him as an intruder. Eunmi noticed the hero's heavy breathing and considerable thoughtfulness. Kim admitted that the reincarnation operation had completely failed. This means that his life will pass in his current state. Wandering down the street, the hero could not forgive himself for his failure. Just now, someone caught up with Kim. It turned out that it was Eunmi, who decided to find out about the hero's well-being. Kim thanked the girl, but did not need any care. In fact, he couldn't believe that the dugout was worried about it. However, the hero wanted to know how Eunmi found out that he was at home during the day. The girl admitted that, as an awakened one, she possessed the ability of a detective. When Eunmi started to explain her ability, Kim suddenly stopped her. The hero stared at something lying right in front of the character's feet. There was blood spilled on the asphalt, and something was lying there. Eunmi gasped and took a closer look. There was a dead raccoon lying in the middle of the road. The girl explained to Kim that this was a common outcome. Just then, suddenly Kim lifted the animal by the scruff of the neck. The girl heard the hero's strange mutterings about his lost life. Then the hero stood up and took the raccoon with him. Eunmi had no choice but to let Kim go. She only hoped that the hero took the dead animal to bury it. At the same time, Kim recalled what materials could be used to create golems. Among them, the organic golems, which were made from the corpses of animals, stood out in particular. So, regarding the dead raccoon, Kim had some plans. Eunmi watched Kim leave with her eyes. The girl found it surprising that the hero also had a very soft side to his character. Hours have passed since then, and evening has come. Back at home, Kim wasn't particularly happy with the results of the experiments. No matter how hard he tried, his manipulations of the raccoon were unsuccessful. Just as Kim was beginning to think about how to restore his magical powers, his phone rang. The hero hissed nervously for the first time, because he didn't expect calls. As it turned out, Kim was constantly receiving calls with various offers for work as an analyst. It so happened that the recent acquaintance with Esther turned out to be bad for the hero. So every time, Kim simply dropped the challenge. But not even a minute had passed before someone started calling the hero again. But this time, Kim was faced with aggressive advertising regarding food. Being greedy for various delicacies, the hero naturally became interested. A little later, Kim went outside. Unable to resist the tempting advertisement, Kim wandered towards the promised treats. At some point, a van blocked the street. Interested in what was happening, Kim himself approached the car. Looking at that one, he thought that the driver didn't know how to park at all. As soon as Kim turned away, the van door opened. A strong man jumped out from there. Swiftly, he approached the hero, with confident actions, firmly embracing him. Kim was unable to resist for long, his consciousness gradually fading. The last thing I saw was the image of a strange man. For a moment, Kim was overcome by a haze of oblivion. As soon as he came to, he felt that his hands were tied, and Kim's eyes couldn't see anything either. For the first time, the hero concluded that the earth was a terrible and disgusting place. At some point, Kim heard voices talking about it. The kidnappers discussed Kim without any embarrassment, as well as his insignificant rank. Then the kidnappers started to joke around about how easy the kidnapping had been. Soon, Kim heard the kidnappers greeting their boss. Everyone fell silent and heavy footsteps were heard. Kim tensed up when they started talking about it as if it was some kind of commodity. Suddenly, the heavy footsteps stopped. The boss's voice asked to wait. Next, a familiar voice addressed Kim. The hero did not answer, and then the steps resumed. At some point, a hand roughly grabbed the blindfold over Kim's eyes. While tearing it off, the boss of the kidnappers said hello. It was Farid, who was genuinely happy to meet Kim. A difficult conversation ensued between the characters regarding the kidnapping. Farid began to explain from afar, touching on rumors about a man who had passed the magical labyrinth on his first try. But the main thing that surprised Farid in these rumors was that the man was an F-rank carrier. In this regard, the great hunter immediately guessed about Kim. Then, laughing, Farid declared that he would sell Kim. The whole situation boiled down to the usual profit from the kidnapping and sale of a valuable specialist. Moreover, Farid made it clear that this business was actively paying for itself. Thanks to Farid's explanations, the situation Kim found himself in was more than clear to the hero. Pointing to the people behind him, Farid admitted that he had brainwashed them, and they served the great hunter faithfully. At some point, Kim began to ask Farid to let him go. It goes without saying that the great hunter did not want to do anything like that, so he simply said goodbye to the hero. At the same time, he gave orders to his people to get to work. Even though Kim was silent, in his thoughts he was in absolute panic. Farid's people subsequently carried out the order. Kim was picked up, carried and thrown into a certain room. Wearing hazmat suits, the kidnappers laughed at the idea that the hero would soon pass out. Kim glanced at them furtively. The hero somehow raised himself up, but did not understand where he found himself. While thinking, Kim suddenly smelled something. The smell was sweetish and spread rapidly throughout the room. Looking around, the hero noticed a strange-looking object. The hero understood that the object was clearly emitting a sleeping gas, but he believed in his ability to resist this force, as a great magician. Yet Kim could not wait, and therefore began to try to escape. With all his might, he began to try to untangle himself. Kim's efforts were almost at the limit of what was possible. At some point, through his own efforts and calls to magic, Kim caused a spark. The rope that had previously held his hands snapped. Still conscious, Kim continued his attempts to get out of this situation. Now that his hands were free, he tried to call for help using the phone. Naturally, the hero's phone was taken away. Then, leaning his hand on the floor, he stood up. Slowly, Kim approached the strange object in the room. He ran his hand along the chains that were attached to the sensor. Next, firmly grasping the chain, he lifted the object. Meanwhile, none of their captors realized that the sleeping pill had no effect on Kim. Suddenly, he heard a terrible roar behind him. Turning around, they saw a whole wave of gas rushing towards them. At the same moment, covering their mouths and noses, they tried not to inhale the gas. Then, a sensor flew out of the clouds of gas, hitting one of the kidnappers right in the forehead. The second kidnapper was shocked by what happened, but he could no longer do anything at all. His body was weakening, his arms and legs were going numb. Soon, Kim himself appeared in the midst of the clouds of gas. The hero appreciated the beneficial effect of sleeping gas. As he was about to move on, he suddenly kicked the phone. It was precisely this find that Kim needed right now. The first thing Kim did was dial the number that first came to mind in such critical situations. I made the call and began to wait. About 20 seconds later, a police officer answered the call. Kim immediately reported that he had been kidnapped. However, for some reason the police officer could not hear the hero. No matter how loudly Kim tried to speak, no one heard him. Changing tactics, the hero began typing a message asking for help. The message was sent, receiving an immediate response from the call notification system. Since the hero couldn't get through to the police using messages, he tried to figure out when he would respond to the call. However, no matter how hard Kim tried, he only received automatic replies. After a dozen attempts, the hero realized that the plan had failed. There was nothing else to do, so Kim picked up the incense burner again. Now, having decided to continue his escape on his own. At the same time, a new group of thieves was passing through the warehouse. At some point, they noticed something. A suspicious-looking smoke was spreading in their direction, in the middle of which, a guy familiar to the kidnappers was walking. Taking advantage of the kidnappers' moment of confusion, Kim spun the incense burner. Next, pull your hand back and swing. With all his might, the hero threw the censer towards the kidnappers. She hit one of them right in the face. Only now did the second kidnapper realize that Kim himself had broken free. But he couldn't do anything, because he himself came face to face with the censer. Blood spurted from his nose and the kidnapper lost consciousness. Kim laughed, because with the magical artifact in his hands it was easier to beat everyone. Kim did not stop for long, because it was necessary to find a way out as quickly as possible. As soon as the hero moved, he was paralyzed. His soul sensed a powerful flow of magic near him. Kim was sure that this was the gate, which meant that there was an exit from the building. The hero already assumed that, having passed through the gate, he would be able to appear somewhere near the city. But right now, a whole crowd of people gathered a couple of meters behind Kim. Trying not to waste his time on them, Kim moved from his place. Having found the nearest descent, Kim began to overcome it. But after taking just a couple of steps up the stairs, a terrible pain echoed through his leg. The impulse was so powerful that Kim immediately broke out in a sweat. The hero's movement slowed down, but the kidnappers were getting closer with every second. They pursued Kim relentlessly. The pursuers stopped when they noticed one object in the hero's hands. Kim saw this too and began to spin the censer. A turbulent stream of sleeping gas gushed towards the pursuers. Covering their mouths and noses, they tried to avoid being exposed to the gas. At the same time, Kim was doing something interesting. Having unwound the chain, he threw the incense burner towards the kidnappers. Without realizing it, one of the kidnappers caught the incense burner in his hand. Suddenly, the kidnapper made his move. As quickly as possible, he rushed towards Kim, pressing him against the wall. Still holding on, he threatened to deal with the hero. Kim, who had been helpless until now, suddenly pulled away the kidnapper's hand. After which, he sharply thrust out his knee. A worthy blow landed, right on the scoundrel's jaw. Having lost his balance and inhaled gas, the kidnapper collapsed unconscious. After him, no longer able to hold their breath, all the others fell down. The hero stood up, picking up the censer from the floor. Due to the loss of mana, the flow of sleeping gas almost stopped. The chances of escape were becoming less and less, so Kim again turned his gaze to the gate. The flow of outgoing magic was so great that the hero could easily determine where to move. So Kim hurried. Having reached the huge door, the hero began to push it. The doors gave way and opened. By an unfortunate coincidence, Kim found himself in a meeting regarding his sale. The buyers who arrived through the gate were just discussing the goods. There was a bit of a commotion, and Farid had to make excuses. But he wasn't particularly angry with Kim, because the hero sensed the gate and went out to it himself. At this point, one of the customers decided to find out how Kim got past security. With heavy hearts, they were forced to believe that Kim had dealt with them all. They even thought that the hero was not F rank at all. Kim decided to take advantage of this misconception. However, Farid, who was present, was an obstacle in this regard. The situation became awkward. Now, customers began asking Farid to help calm Kim down. After all, Farid was a great S-rank hunter. Unexpectedly for Kim, Farid agreed to help. In addition, Farid was promised some bonuses in case of success. Then, approaching Kim, the great hunter began to threaten that he would subject the hero to unprecedented pain. Kim himself was completely at a loss, expecting that the police would simply have to show up immediately and save him. But then, Farid suddenly started talking to the hero about escaping. The great hunter promised that if Kim was fast enough, he would let him go on purpose. The hero sighed to himself. For more than anything in the world, he hated running. Afterwards, Kim turned wearily to Farid. The hero wanted to know if the great hunter had ever seen exactly how Kim ran. Afterwards, raising his stubborn gaze to him. After this was said, scenes from his first meeting with Kim appeared in Farid's memory. How exactly the hero reacted to threats. Later, he said that he had never seen Kim running. In response to this, Kim continued to glare at Farid. The great hunter guessed that Kim wanted to convey the idea that he had no intention of running away. In a similar vein, Farid suggested resolving everything through a fight. Kim had neither the strength nor the opportunity to defend himself, so he simply gave up. Farid laughed, because he didn't believe the man who had previously killed all the guards in his path. It was then that Kim felt the magic begin to flow past him. Farid also felt strange fluctuations in mana. They both stared at the gate from which someone was coming out. As it turned out, it was the man who also showed up for the deal. The hero looked carefully at the gate again, now clearly understanding that they were in fact just a passage. The man who had come immediately entered into dialogue with the others. As it turned out, he was a carrier. Farid was told that the teleportation mage himself stood before him. At some point, their dialogue became so enthusiastic that everyone simply forgot about Kim. Subsequently, Farid suddenly activated his magic. As quickly as possible, his hand was filled with power. After which, with all his might, Farid aimed a blow at the magician's jaw. A powerful serve threw him back. Kim was again shocked by what had happened. For others, this exchange of pleasantries came as a shock. After receiving the blow, the magician flew into the wall and seemed to die. Now, Farid turned his gaze to the customers. The great hunter began to explain that the teleportation mage was unreliable and could escape at any moment. Farid admitted that, in general, he didn't care who or what an individual person lived by. Listening to all this, the hero did not understand a damn thing about what was happening. At the same time, Farid began to glow again from magical saturation. Suddenly he started acting like kidnapping people was wrong. The buyers tried to escape into the gate, but Farid rushed to intercept them. The blow was struck and the first obstacle was overcome. As before, the hero watched these events in silence, only once again becoming convinced that defeating Farid was extremely difficult. Farid was truly incomparable, occupying a niche among the strongest. Those like the Great Hunter have attained the most powerful known S rank. In fact, Farid was at the very top of the food chain. Except for those equal in rank, no one and nothing could stand before it. Pleas for mercy were nothing more than empty words for Farid. Each time, the Great Hunter thoroughly enjoyed the fear of his victims. Each time, asking them not to try to press on pity, which only caused them even more horror. In any case, it all ended in nightmarish screams. Having finished with the customers, Farid's gaze fell on Kim. And just then, the police arrived at the hangar where all the action was taking place. The hero even clarified to Farid that he did it on purpose. Upon hearing this, an emotion of panic appeared on the Great Hunter's face. Kim himself became worried, suspecting that he had done something wrong. Having gotten rid of his previous emotions, Farid advised Kim not to say too much. He confessed to the hero that he had already stopped the kidnapping of the Awakened a long time ago. Farid acted secretly, because the relevant structures were unwieldy. The only thing Farid regretted about what happened was Kim's actions and words regarding surrender. However, Farid was no longer going to ask about the choice the hero had made. Farid patted Kim on the shoulder and went off somewhere. Kim looked back, now being in the middle of a complete mess with the gates and the dead people. A minute later, the police burst into the warehouse. Calling for him to keep his hands visible, they pointed their guns at Kim. Some of them moved forward to intercept the hero. Having quickly overpowered the hero, they began to find out where the kidnapped man was. Kim tried to explain that he was the victim, but the law enforcement officers did not listen. From one ridiculous situation, Kim managed to end up in another. Then, having twisted his arms, they were about to take the hero away. But the police actions were stopped by a desperate female voice. Unmi appeared out of breath at the warehouse. The girl did not understand why Kim was handcuffed. Thanks to Unmi's efforts, the hero's handcuffs were unfastened. Still holding back his emotions, Kim was furious in his thoughts at the stupidity of what had happened. When Kim was released, he decided to personally find out where Unmi had managed to come from in the warehouse. The girl willingly showed the message from Farid. Meanwhile, the police were identifying the identities of those who were alive and dead. The discovery aroused genuine interest among them. The police discovered an interesting detail: both the dead and the living in the hangar were wanted for kidnapping. Unmi was also struck by this coincidence. The police openly believed that this criminal group had come to an end. When the conversation turned to who had killed everyone in this place, Kim honestly pointed to Farid. However, the police didn't really believe in this hero's story. Realizing that everything was pointless, the hero sighed heavily. Loudly and clearly, Kim announced that he had dealt with everyone in this place personally. Unmi became interested in what was said and began to analyze the situation in which Kim found himself. After which, she examined the hangar. Bodies lay lifeless everywhere, and Kim himself did not look like a person who had practically no external wounds. The girl even began to doubt whether Kim had really been kidnapped at all, or the hero was the boss of a criminal group. In any case, time passed and a new day arrived. When Kim woke up, he blamed himself for how things had turned out. Every now and then, he would stare at the artifact he had taken with him from the hangar. The hero considered such an acquisition useful, albeit spontaneous. Moreover, since everyone considered Kim to be the owner of the item, he could do with it as he wished. He laughed as he recalled trying to explain to the police that Farid was involved in everything. Returning to the incense burner, Kim admitted that it could only be used on people. Besides, the kettle just started boiling right now. The hero hurried to turn off the stove. Pouring the resulting mixture into a glass, Kim was glad that the idea had worked. The hero couldn't stop praising himself, because only an archmage could do something like this on a distant planet, and without any special ingredients. The mana booster Kim desperately needed was ready. Naturally, Kim immediately started using it. Then Kim exhaled loudly and put the glass back in place. All preparations were completed, and the hero decided to test his ability to cast spells. After performing a few gestures, streams of magic began to swirl around Kim. For the first time, the hero decided to restore his body with the help of magic. Next, he tried to stop any aging processes in the body at the same time. The spells were performed, and now it was up to the magic itself. There was a bright flash of light, and Kim was stomping her foot on the floor with all her might. For the first time in his entire time in the host body, Kim no longer felt pain in his leg. Even though the deal worked out, the hero was once again convinced that the host's mana level was simply insignificant. Many factors have prevented Kim from being an effective magician so far. In any case, such an undertaking was already a success. For now, Kim decided to take a break from the spells. Walking around the room, he eventually grabbed the refrigerator door. But he didn't have time to open it, because someone started knocking on the door. Expecting to meet Unmi there again, Kim walked towards the door. For the same reason, he easily opened the front door. However, there Kim was met by a man he didn't know at all. Looking at him, a memory appeared in the protagonist's head that concerned the man as the owner of the apartment. Kim greeted him awkwardly. Suddenly, the man started talking to the hero about hard times. Further, he went on to specify that the rent had never been paid. Additionally, the man shoved mail into Kim's hands, which contained unpaid bills for other services. Kim hesitated, not even knowing what to say. Looking at the amounts there, Kim felt alarmed. Having listened to polite complaints against him, the hero decided to find out how much the debt was. Describing in detail the amount of payments overdue for months, the man named the debt at a whole 100,000. What he heard struck Kim as if he were struck by lightning. The man was so kind that he gave the hero another month to pay off the debt. With this unpleasant news in his soul, Kim returned to his home. Having no more than a couple of thousand in his pocket now, the hero could not pay off the debt. The fear that Kim would become homeless overwhelmed him. He even tried to remember whether the carrier had hidden money somewhere during his life. At this thought, something went off in Kim's head. He quickly jumped up, letting go of everything. Grabbing the phone, he remembered some previously unaccepted money. As quickly as possible, he dialed someone's number and made a call. A voice came over the line that had already gotten Kim into trouble countless times. It was Farid, who was not expecting a call from Kim. Their conversation touched on monetary compensation for the accident Farid had caused not long ago. When the conversation turned to the amount, Kim thought for a second. Trying to cover the debt and leave something for himself, he barely audibly mentioned 2 million. However, remembering how much trouble Farid had brought to the hero, Kim seriously considered increasing the required amount. At some point, having made up his mind, the hero loudly announced the sum of 3 million. Hearing this, Farid began to behave strangely. The whole point was that for a great hunter, such money was mere pennies. Then, he immediately made the transfer. Kim's breath caught in his throat when such a huge sum came his way so easily. But the hero's joy was not great, because the total amount of his debts was slightly less than the money received. A stingy tear appeared in the hero's eyes, because he did not know how he could earn more. Just then, a call came on Kim's phone. It was Kay, whose call the hero was actually glad to receive. In any case, Kim wanted to thank Kay for all his previous help. But right now, one topic concerning money and the hunter Kay came to the hero's mind. A little later, the scene moved to a luxury establishment. Having invited Kay there, the hero wanted to treat him. After a short conversation, Kim readily agreed to coffee, even though he actually couldn't stand it. Approaching the counter, they took turns placing orders. To everyone's surprise, Kim asked for all coffee to be excluded from the coffee itself. The seller shuddered at what he heard. Nevertheless, he began to fulfill the order. A minute later, at the table, the characters were discussing Kim's recent incident. Kay sincerely regretted that he had not been able to come to the hero's rescue then. The hunter made excuses that he was busy patching up the breach that had been made during the gate's breakthrough. Kim accepted these words without blaming the hunter in any way. Then Kim suddenly interrupted Kay. The hero started talking about how often the hunter had been on defense when breaking through the gates. This question caused some confusion in Kay. This was exactly the reaction the hero expected. Kim could clearly see the fear brewing inside Kay about visiting the gate. Later, more openly, Kim decided to ask the hunter about this. Kay admitted that this is exactly how things are. The mention of the gate made the hunter short of breath, and his fingers twitch. The hero understood perfectly well what the origins of this misfortune were. After all, in one raid Kay was almost killed, and all his comrades betrayed him. So, Kim started talking about how he won't always be able to be a support for Kay. The hero led his speech to the fact that Kay should continue his life, or prepare for major changes in it. The hunter calmly agreed with all this. Kim made all these speeches for the sake of even greater opportunity to manipulate the hunter. Now, getting to the main point, the desire to train K. The hero declared that he would help K master the secrets of magic and mana control to perfection. Of course, K was extremely happy to hear something like this. From now on, Kim understood that he had completely hooked the hunter on his manipulation hook. Without wasting any time, Kim suggested that the hunter immediately head to the nearest gate. A couple of hours later, the characters arrived at one of these places. Right in front of them, the ruins of the collision, a special D-rank gate, were visible. This area was considered ideal for training. So now Kim demanded that K demonstrate the best of his abilities. Sighing, K agreed. Although doing something like this in front of the hero made him feel a little awkward. K closed his eyes and then opened them again, awakening his magical powers. Winds of mana swirled around him, constantly hitting the shield in his hand. At some point, a nearby crushing anchor crashed to the ground. Immediately behind him, K activated the protective screen. The hunter hoped that the hero appreciated this demonstration. However, Kim did not look impressed. The hero couldn't understand why the protective screen only blocked damage in front of itself. K hesitated after hearing the question. The whole point was that this was the only way the skill worked. For Kim, this demonstration was nothing more than a monkey mastering the simplest tools. As a result, the hero insisted that the skill was supposed to protect K in a circle. The hero went into detail, describing the protective screen as an impenetrable dome. Hearing this, K decided to try to bring the hero's idea to life. Despite all the efforts, the screen became a little larger, but the shape did not change. K's ridiculous attempts infuriated the hero. He demanded that K not give up trying to achieve the desired form. Coming closer, tapping on K's chest, the hero demanded that he distribute his mana differently. The hunter was worried, and didn't really understand what Kim wanted to achieve from him. In response, Kim asked the hunter not to worry, but just to focus on the target. The hero said that the most important thing was keeping the image in the head. K agreed with this statement. For the next half hour, Kim was actively engaged in adjusting the hunter's mana consumption. After a little more time, the desired result was finally achieved. K rejoiced like a child, because the hero's idea actually turned out to be feasible. When the hunter tried to move, a gap appeared in the sphere. A couple of moments later, the entire protective dome began to crack. Although K was a little upset, the hero did not consider what happened a tragedy. Silently, the hero drove away the thoughts in his head that K had hidden considerable potential, ultimately receiving gratitude from the hunter for unlocking the skill's potential. Moreover, magical abilities were influenced by the mental state, and the more self-confident and emotionally stable the magician was, the more perfect his magic was. But then K turned to the hero again. The hunter wanted to know what would happen next. The hero grinned and announced the beginning of the practice. After all, the best way to hone your skills was to practice with monsters. It was precisely with these that K was destined to clash in battle. The monster's giant sword tried to break through the hunter's protective screen. Having withstood the onslaught, Kim himself now began to apply the pressure. At some point, completely destroy the enemy. It was then that K heard quick movements coming from his direction. Another enemy tried to defeat K. The blow was delivered, landing right in the hunter's back area. And yet K survived. After all, the protective sphere placed around the body saved him. Then, turning sharply, the hunter counterattacked. Having thrown the monster aside, K prepared himself for a second or two. Afterwards, having picked up speed, he jumped forward. With a swift attack, the formidable monster was smashed to pieces. Praising the success, Kim, of course, was watching all of this. Besides, the time has come for the hero himself to act. After all, crystals began to fall from the monster. While K dealt with the other monsters, Kim began collecting precious mana crystals. To put it even more simply, the hero secretly used K to steal loot. Kim carefully placed a considerable quantity of precious stones into the bag. Moreover, the hero considered this option more honest than asking K to borrow money. Kim only hoped that the hunter wouldn't be able to keep track of how his loot was being stolen. Having collected enough mana stones, Kim returned to the hunter. K didn't answer and was breathing heavily. The hunter's reaction confused Kim. The hero was frightened that K had managed to uncover his cunning plan. Suddenly, the story took a digression, deciding to tell more about K. K was a special boy who never had any idols in his life. Other people's achievements did not evoke any special feelings in him. But at one point, with the appearance of one special person, K experienced this feeling. And this simply did not fit into the hunter's head. Everything inside K was screaming that Kim was somehow unnatural. No matter how hard Kim tried to hide his true nature, the hunter saw in him an experienced fighter. In any case, I consider Kim to be truly extraordinary. K's long silence and his piercing gaze frightened the hero. Only after a minute of silence did K speak. Mumbling, Kay tried to admit that the fear had not gone away. Eventually, after apologizing, he convinced Kim that he would master the new skill perfectly. In response, Kim turned to the hunter. He reassured Kay, promising that with time the result would be achieved and everything else would work out. The hero made it clear that he was always ready to help Kay and conduct training literally every day. Kay almost burst into tears from such heartfelt concern. After all, Kim was the first one who treated the hunter with such reverence, becoming not just a friend, but a mentor. Moreover, now I am burning with the desire to repay kindness with kindness. And when the speech touched on this, Kim was shocked. However, the hero did not know what to answer the hunter. And so, by refusing any help, Kim only seduced Kay even more. In the eyes of the hunter, Kim looked like a model of a benefactor who did not need selfish handouts. In connection with all this, Kay slowly began to approach the hero. He proudly explained that he fully understood the meaning of Kim's words. Making it clear that he would not overwork himself, Kay invited Kim to leave the gate. As they walked away from the gate, Kay continued to praise Kim in his thoughts. As usual, the hero remained silent. He also reasoned to himself, hoping that the hunter had not revealed his plan. With each subsequent step, the anxiety inside Kim gradually subsided. Moreover, Kay completely ignored the mana stones scattered everywhere, considering that for hunters of such rank, jewelry was a trifle. And if so, then Kim was in passionate anticipation of the clearing of other gates, by other hands. From now on, Kim had plenty of money, so life gradually improved. Having already walked a considerable distance from the gate, Kim was pierced by a feeling of anxiety. On the way, he met Eunmi again. At the sight of her, to Kay's surprise, the hero stood rooted to the spot. The girl was the first to speak, beginning to note how long it had taken to clear the gates. Continuing, the girl indicated that she had come to convey one message. But first, Eunmi wanted to make sure of something. Her interest was in Kim and why he too was in the same gate. Eunmi recalled that Kim had recently undergone a reawakened test due to suspicions of cheating. But the girl could not even imagine that he would visit the gate illegally. The hero tensed up, because he really had visited gates that were not permissible for his rank. In order to justify himself, Kim decided to identify himself as Kay's porter. The excuse didn't suit Eunmi very well, and besides, the hero's bag was too small for the porter. Eunmi did not stop, reminding him that Kay would also suffer if the violation was confirmed. The hero almost lost consciousness when the girl's speech touched on the latest fines. Besides, Eunmi didn't really believe that the hero would decide to become a porter. The girl honestly pointed out that Kim's behavior aroused a lot of suspicion. Moreover, by actively breaking the rules, Kim put himself in danger, which was also a violation of the rules. Concluding her long monologue, Eunmi asked the characters to cooperate. In his mind, Kim admitted for the first time that he had underestimated Eunmi, but the hero did not want to provoke aggression. Next, Eunmi asked Kay to step aside to discuss work matters. Kim watched as even an A-rank hunter like Kay was forced to obey the will of a man from the association. For the hero, this only meant that the earnings from using Kay were lost. Be that as it may, the hero could no longer change the situation. Besides, Kim already had some kind of backup plan. Even though the characters missed each other, the girl secretly watched Kim. Time passed and a new day arrived. Lying in bed, as was his tradition, Kim would gather information about the hunters every morning. But now, he was more interested in the gates, in which the hunters discovered an unusual artifact. Having saved the information, the hero hoped that he would be able to use it in the future through Kay. As he stood up, Kim admired a bracelet he had recently acquired. Time was running out, so Kim was about to go on an experiment. After leaving the house, he soon went beyond the city limits. The wilderness was new to Kim. Only thanks to the satellite map did he somehow find his way around. Until finally I found the gate. It was a rank F gate that suited Kim perfectly. From information on the internet, Kim knew that the color of the gates could be used to determine whether there were bosses there. In addition, as a rule, monsters spawned around the gates, whose killing meant the end of the cleansing. It was precisely for the sake of hunting, and for free at that the hero came to this place. Thus, Kim tried to master the craft of a hunter and personally destroy monsters. A second later, the hero passed through the gate. Behind them, he found himself in a completely different world. Endless green fields were visible all around. Following these views, at some point the hero came across a herd of animals. These were the foul goats, who affected their victims with hellish bleeding. As it turned out, Kim was ready to meet with them. He slowly took out the bottle and uncorked it. Kim knew that the carcasses of these creatures were highly valued on the market. Kim drank the liquid in the bottle to the very bottom. In an instant, he felt a previously unprecedented surge of mana. Naturally, the monsters saw such a bright performance on the sidelines. By striking a spark from his finger, this was precisely the effect Kim was counting on. Next, point your finger towards the goat. After which, at the hero's command, a huge flaming ball flew out of his finger. The hero said goodbye to the goat, as it would soon turn to ashes. Kim's fireball was inexorably approaching the goat. Almost touching the monster, the fireball began to rapidly lose weight and crumble, until it completely disappeared into thin air. Only a thin spark managed to reach its target, leaving a small burn. In response, the goat stamped his hooves and raised his head. Enraged by what had happened, he began to steam. The next action was to run towards Kim. The goat's eyes sparkled, dreaming of revenge. For the first time, Kim felt such fear that he screamed at the top of his lungs. Subsequently, saving himself, the hero began to run away. Every now and then he looked back, trying to figure out how far he had managed to break away. But with each subsequent turn of his head, the goat became closer and closer. Kim couldn't even imagine that the horned creature could be so fast. This also forced Kim himself to speed up. He hurried to leave the gate as quickly as possible. A couple of meters were overcome and the hero leaped forward. At this moment, the creepy goat opened his mouth to his mother. Luckily, his fangs failed to grab Kim. In the last seconds, the hero left the gate. Only when he found himself in the human world did Kim dare to look back again. The hero exhaled, because the danger was behind him. Immediately, Kim was overcome with an emotion of disappointment. After all, as it turned out, the host's body was much more trashy than even Kim had previously imagined. Suddenly, the hero heard the crunch of branches not far from him. A man who clearly knew the carrier looked at Kim with a smile. Naturally, the hero did not remember it at all. Introducing himself as John, the man began to remind him how he and Kim had both started out as hunters. The hero was silent at first, thinking about how not to give himself away. But the fears were in vain, because John didn't even really remember Kim's name. The hero didn't like that John was overly talkative, and also constantly mentioned the wearer's failures. Kim later explained his visit to the area as a desire to hunt. John was pleasantly surprised by this news, and by the meeting itself. To avoid any misunderstandings, Kim lied, just in case, that he had some memory problems. After all, the hero did not want to leave, believing that John would allow light to be shed on the carrier's history. Suddenly, John suggested to the hero to form a team and hunt together. John admitted that he just had one free seat. After his suggestion, he pointed somewhere. A group of hunters stood unnoticed among the trees. John called the people there his current partners. After which, he began to introduce the hunters. The hero assessed the composition, but was forced to refuse under the pretext of mana costs. John saw no problem, as the group could manage without an attacking element. Thus, Kim found out that the porter did not show up for the raid. The hero was deciding about his participation, because on the one hand he had to carry things, and on the other, he had to get money for it. Seriously, Kim decided to think about this question. The hero was interested not only in money, but also in the opportunity to observe other hunters in action. Kim subsequently gave his consent. After their group entered the gate and soon encountered a powerful monster, the hunters prepared for battle, actively using secondary skills. The monster itself let out a piercing roar. With just one movement, the monster broke the magical shackles that had previously held it back. Now, rushing towards the hunters in order to trample them. The hunters themselves were prepared for such a development of events. On the signal, the support fighters used magic. The magical lasso and summoned tree roots began to envelop the creature. The monster held its ground, and now the warrior made his move. The hunter took a running start and jumped, holding the axe high above him. On the fly, with all his might, he chopped at the monster. Kim, standing on the sidelines, watched this whole event with delight. After receiving damage, the monster's eyes began to roll back. The monster fell on its side, and the hunters began to celebrate their victory. Analyzing, Kim found the teamwork of the hunters to be commendable. The hero assessed their tactics, which were based on distraction, after which the target was tied up and finished off. Although this method was extremely simple, it worked. Kim was confident that this way, it would be possible to easily defeat any F-rank monsters. When it came to the porter, suddenly Kim was offered help. Taking the hero's bag, the warrior hunter thanked Kim for his efforts and approach to the matter. He was actually surprised at how resilient Kim turned out to be. Now, being ready to reward the hero for the work done as a porter. Seemingly emotionless, but actually radiating inner delight, Kim gazed at the wad of money. When the wad of money was handed over, Kim even doubted whether he was worthy of it. The warrior hunter insisted on accepting the reward, since Kim had saved everyone with his unexpected appearance. Afterwards, wanting to know whether the hero would be free the next day, the warrior hunter chuckled as he noted that a new F-rank gate had already been found, and Kim was perfect for the role of responsible porter. At some point, the warrior hunter's eyes touched the bracelet on Kim's hand. 10 hours passed since that meeting and evening came. While relaxing in the establishment, a group of hunters discussed not so much Kim as the bracelet on his wrist. John believed that the hero's hand was most likely a fake. This possibility was allowed, but the hunters were counting on being able to profit from Kim for something else. In a world where monster hunters have become the norm, some have sometimes turned to crime, and then, inexperienced newcomers became their victims. Among hunters, such scoundrels were nicknamed toads. Over the long period of their illegal activities, they even learned to hide their crimes. As for Kim, John urged no one to worry about it. John assured everyone that it was impossible to find a more insignificant type than Kim. In this case, the repeat offenders managed to negotiate a victim. Time passed, and a new day arrived. The hero sat in the appointed place, but so far no one had shown up. Just when Kim began to doubt something, he received a message. While reading this, the hero tried to remember something about John, but just now Kim was called out. The hunters the hero had been waiting for finally showed up. The first thing Kim did was to make sure that his payment for his services was the same. The hunter-warrior confirmed everything and urged not to sit around. A little later, the characters entered one gate. It was a harsh place, more like hell. The hero had some idea about this gate. In this case, there should have been 2 bosses present. One day, in time, Kim would like to study tech. And in general, Kim counted on the fact that working as a porter would be able to feed him well. At some point in time, the group of hunters began to slow down. And Kim also noticed that the group's route was repeated. Confirming his words, the hero pointed to the recently killed monster. While worried, the hero hoped that someone had the skill to find a route. Just then, one of the hunters secretly took out a bottle of potion. Having waited for the right moment, the swing was carried out. Then, with all its force, the bottle smashed against the back of Kim's head. Having fallen to the ground, the hero did not immediately lose consciousness. The hunter-warrior urged Kim not to worry, just to get some sleep. The hero was completely confused, again not understanding the reasons for the Earthling's unprovoked aggression. Kim even thought that this could be a certain fetish. At the same time, the hunters laughed heartily at the situation. But none of them knew that something like this could not work on Kim. Against all odds, Kim held on. And the hunters began to get a little worried, because time was passing. The hero clearly heard their conversations. But Kim wasn't going to give up just like that. He suddenly jumped up, tensing up. The hunters weren't even able to properly react to this flight. It came as a shock to them that Kim had gotten back on his feet at all. Meanwhile, wanting to speed up, the hero threw off his bag. He didn't hear the lasso snap behind him. A strong rope wrapped around one of the hero's legs. Then the lasso was pulled back and Kim lost his balance. The toad hunters found Kim's escape strange. After all, just a year ago he was limping on one leg. And yet, none of them understood how Kim managed to remain conscious. At some point, the rope on Kim's leg loosened. From a small height, he fell painfully on his back. Cursing, Kim tried to get up again. He was called unexpectedly. A hunter-warrior approached, warning that he would kill Kim if he tried to escape again. The hero nodded his head, but wanted to know why they were doing this to him. However, there was no response. The toad hunters stared intently at the hero's bracelet. Eventually, the hero himself noticed it. Next, Kim moved his hand with the bracelet in one direction. He did the same in another, seeing how fascinated the toad hunters were. Finally realizing that the whole fuss was about the bracelet. Kim couldn't have imagined that the bracelet would cause problems. Meanwhile, Kim recalled the bracelet's rare protective properties. The hero could have given the bracelet, but he guessed that they wouldn't let him go. Naturally, a request was subsequently made to give back the bracelet. Next, the hunter-warrior's hand reached out to Kim. Then Kim began to threaten that if anything happened, he would use the bracelet charges. After all, once the charges are exhausted, the bracelet would become an ordinary accessory. Afterwards, turning to John, the hero asked him to let him go. John laughed when Kim swore to keep everything a secret. At the same time, the hunter-warrior's patience was running out. Taking advantage of the surprise, he struck Kim. Then he grabbed him by the chest. He was extremely annoyed with Kim, and was going to teach him a good lesson. Then, he started to beat the hero. The hunter-warrior tried to get Kim to use the bracelet. In any case, death would have awaited the hero. At some point, unable to bear it any longer, Kim asked to stop. Breathing heavily, Kim promised to give him the bracelet. The hunter-warrior smiled, exactly what he had expected. With trembling fingers, Kim reached for the bracelet. And yet he knew that this action would be his end. The hero's life is about to end. But right now, someone's running was heard across the lava field. It goes without saying that everyone heard this stomping. Gradually, the hunter-warrior turned towards the approaching sound. Kim's breath caught when he looked too. It's unclear how, but K appeared somewhere in this place. History rolled back approximately half an hour before these events. This was the moment when Kim was actively using the phone, and K received a message about the imminent start of training when the hero returned from the raid. Kim himself was glad that after everything, K was still in touch with him. K, however, still had a favorable attitude towards the hero. He even planned to present the hero with a gift in the form of a special coffee. About 20 minutes have passed since then. However, there was still no news from Kim. K knew that the F-rank gate was passed quickly, and it was then that I thought something was wrong. After all, the hero could end up in an anomaly with the increase in the gate's difficulty. Just in case, K rushed to the rescue, so he headed towards the gate, soon getting deeper into the forest. That's where the F-rank gate was located. Deciding to make sure of everything, K stepped into them. A couple of steps, and the local wind began to burn K's skin. K kept himself in check, still afraid of being inside the gate. As he moved forward, he found monsters that had been defeated. At some point, I clearly heard the sounds of blows. Immediately thinking of Kim, he rushed at them. Having reached the desired place, the hunter stopped. I found a truly frightening picture there. A group of hunters surrounded poor Kim. They were alarmed when they saw K himself. Kim immediately spoke up, calling for K's help. K froze, seeing Kim so emotional for the first time. But now, these thoughts were not of primary importance. K understood perfectly well that the hero had become a victim of the toads. Blazing with magic, he began to slowly approach them. Seeing the threat approaching, the hunter warrior called on his accomplices to flee, but he himself didn't have time to move, because he was grabbed by K. With all his might, the hunter launched the scoundrel into the rock. It was a piece of cake for K to deal with such bastards. Moreover, they all started running in terror. K also moved from his place. Now he was not burning with the nobility to let anyone go, and still beat the toads so as not to kill them. After the fists, K's shield came into play. Actively wielding it, he interrupted the toads' escape. Their pitiful attempts to save themselves were in vain. The last of them, K grabbed by the edge of his clothes. The captured John was thrown to the ground. Then with all his might, K stepped on his shoulder. Looking at these worthless people, K did not understand how the hero could lose to them. The hunter was torn from these thoughts by Kim's voice. Rising and approaching, the hero thanked for saving him. Wiping the blood from his face, Kim didn't expect K to come after him. The hero apologized to K for making him worry. It was now, during the conversation, that K realized that after the moral trauma he had received, he had spent the first time inside the gate for a long time. The thought crept into his mind that this was another of Kim's plans. Kim distracted K again, asking him to leave the gate together. Moreover, the hero promised not to turn a blind eye to what happened. He just didn't understand why he hadn't noticed the catch earlier. K himself was once again convinced of how instantly Kim could change his emotions. However, without understanding the meaning of Kim's plan, suddenly, Kim started talking about a theoretical team with K. He admitted that if he had been a little stronger, that is exactly what he would have done, further stating that he is proud of K. These beautiful words even brought tears to K's eyes. K immediately remembered that for a very long time he had been unable to create a new squad and recover from past injuries. K's disappointment was so great that for a long time he could not even interact with other hunters. But a lot in his life changed when he had to save Kim. Still believing that the situation with the hero was a clever setup, after going through this, K actually recovered his health. Moreover, Kim's injuries were so serious that it only emphasized the hero's intentions to help K. With these thoughts in mind, K decided to openly ask why the hero always helped him. Kim looked at him puzzledly and asked again. Later, explaining his actions by the fact that K was a good person. The hunter never expected to hear such flattering words about himself. Then together, they headed towards the exit of the gate. Already in the human world, Kim insisted that the hunter file a complaint. By then, Kim had already asked for forgiveness, since the current training session had been cancelled. K suggested that the hero visit the hospital, but Kim refused and trudged home. And once again, K was shocked by the hero's decisions. After all, an F-rank hunter would not have been able to heal himself on his own. Kim himself moved sluggishly, feeling a burning pain throughout his body. Without saying it out loud, but in his mind, he was almost dying. A couple of days have passed since then. Standing in front of the mirror, Kim examined himself. After a long time and a lot of effort, the hero found himself completely healthy. Kim was actively discussing how many misfortunes had happened to him recently. Moreover, for the sake of yet another boring investigation, he again needed to visit the association. Even though Kim grumbled, he couldn't do anything about it. Moreover, the hero already had certain concerns regarding the bracelet. Kim didn't know what to do with this thing. Even though it was expensive, it didn't guarantee the purchase of a dragon lung. And so for now, Kim decided to simply carry the bracelet with him. Considering the effect of neutralizing any damage on the order of 2 times, the hero found the bracelet vital. After leaving his home, Kim suddenly stood still. Right in front of the exit of that house, there was a sports car. Suddenly, the glass on the car door started to roll down. Kim sighed in shock. Farid's satisfied face appeared from there. Farid remained silent, actively glaring at Kim. And yet he knew that the hero had definitely noticed him. So, Farid decided to find out where exactly Kim was heading. The hero answered honestly that he was leading the way to the association. But as soon as Kim tried to leave, Farid commanded him to get into the car. Kim sighed and obeyed. Of course, Kim did not express any fear in his thoughts, but was simply acting out of curiosity. However, he had no idea why Farid had come at all. Besides, Kim carefully kept Farid's secret, which meant there was no point in him visiting the hero. At some point, Farid suddenly pressed the gas pedal. The car sped along the streets, and Farid started talking about the toads that Kim had encountered. Having no idea how Farid could know this, Kim confirmed everything. Now Farid explained that he had come because he wanted to visit Kim. Kim asked again, and Farid made it clear that he wanted to make sure that the hero's wounds were not serious. And in general, Farid considered the hero a delusional person. After this, Farid asked Kim to look in the glove compartment for a gift. When he opened the glove compartment, something fell into Kim's hands. It was a restoration potion that Farid presented to Kim just in case. Looking at the potion, for about a second or two, Kim remembered his homeland. In Kim's world, such things were extremely common and used everywhere. So, just in case, Kim decided to accept the gift. Farid was amazed that Kim was not surprised by the gift. Of course, Kim was not seriously going to drink the gifted potion, but rather leave it for research. After about 5 minutes of driving, Farid stopped the car. Kim glanced furtively out the window, seeing tall buildings opposite. Farid made it clear that he simply threw Kim into the association. Kim never expected that a scoundrel like Farid would do something without malicious intent. Finally, Farid advised Kim to take care of himself and not to dare die out of stupidity. Having already left the car, Kim suddenly turned to Farid. The hero wanted to know what the catch was behind such concern on the part of the great hunter. Farid smiled and said that he was interested in the development of hunters. Kim, in Farid's opinion, was one of the few who had potential. Having heard all this, the hero roughly understood Farid's hint about keeping the secret. But Farid was not going to chat anymore, so he asked Kim to move away from the car. Immediately after this, he pressed the gas pedal again. Kim looked for a long time after the departing sports car. Perhaps out of stupidity, or perhaps for real, considering Farid a true patriot who fights for everything good, against everything bad. At least that's what Kim wanted to think, although Farid's true nature looked completely different. Kim, thinking, went to the association building. He was haunted by Farid's strange interest in him, an F-rank hunter. Sinking deeper and deeper into thought, Kim closed his eyes. After all, he had already learned the truth once. One day, Kim read in the newsfeed about the mass killings of the awakened. The media was full of details about the crazy hunter who improved his skills in this way. For some reason, this article reminded the hero of Farid. So Kim decided to analyze his behavior. After all, it was Farid who was the first to show extreme interest in Kim. Moreover, he was involved in the kidnapping of the awakened. After which, Kim put his findings together. Everything pointed to the fact that the hero was to become Farid's victim. Kim found it extremely difficult to believe all of this. Sighing, the hero regretted that he had ever caught Farid's eye. From now on, Kim set himself the goal of repairing the host's body, or the transmigration of the soul. A lot of time has passed since then. The research carried out by Kim dragged on. His efforts have not yet borne any fruit, and in principle, the hero didn't understand why the hell he was working so hard if he was reborn for the sake of rest. Just now, someone started calling Kim. Casually, his hand reached for the phone. Holding the screen up to his eyes, Kim saw an unknown number calling him. And yet the hero answered. After which, I was faced with a long silence. Finally, a pleasant female voice was heard on the other end of the phone. It was Unmi who was looking for a meeting with Kim. The characters discussed everything among themselves, and the action moved on to the next day. In a crowded place, a conversation took place between Kim and Unmi. Kim himself was not particularly happy about this meeting, because wherever Unmi was, there was trouble to be expected. Nevertheless, Kim was ready to listen to what she needed. After a pause, the girl started talking about some kind of help in her work. Unmi honestly told that an investigation was underway to catch some criminals whose traces were found in the gate. Developing her thought, Unmi reported that there was an acute shortage of people for such matters. Therefore, the girl wanted Kim to explore the gate and look at everything there personally. Besides, the girl liked Kim as a person not connected with any organization. Eunmi immediately stipulated that the remuneration would be modest due to budget cuts. And yet, the girl hoped that one day, in response to help from her side, Kim would help her. Silently, with reproach, the hero looked at her. Eunmi sighed and turned away, realizing that most likely the offer was not at all tempting. Without thinking twice, Eunmi offered to add her own money to the total reward, if only Kim would agree to help. The hero was still silent, not understanding in his mind why Eunmi even cared about this investigation. So, I finally decided to find out if the girl had received any kind of bonus for catching criminals. Eunmi admitted that she had no benefit, but she could not sit on the sidelines while others suffered. As a being from another world, previously surrounded by immoral individuals, Kim saw a certain purity in Eunmi. So after a long silence, Kim finally spoke. And first of all, the hero raised the topic of money. Mentioning Eunmi's personal money, Kim demanded that it be spent immediately. It was for this reason that the characters found themselves in the nearest diner. Having enjoyed the view enough, the hero put noodles in his mouth. Instantly, his taste buds were saturated with a stunning flavor. Eunmi watched Kim carefully as he ate. The girl did not understand Kim, having previously been afraid of what he might want. After all, Kim simply demanded regular lunch for 2 weeks. At first confused, Eunmi took Kim to one of her favorite places. But now, watching the hero run away with the noodles, she was not afraid that he would not appreciate it. And in principle, finding Kim not of this world. Unlike other awakened ones, the hero led a rather modest life. Eunmi was afraid that Kim was simply pretending. Moreover, during his kidnapping, Kim did not run away, but remained in plain sight. And Kim had many secrets, for example, entering the gates of a rank not his own. The picture was further complicated by the fact that many were actively trying to lure Kim into their employ. In general, Eunmi found all situations involving Kim suspicious and without a logical conclusion. About 10 minutes later, Kim was finishing his hearty lunch. So much of everything was eaten that the hero even began to feel some discomfort. When the last of the food had entered Kim's mouth, he was ready to move on to Eunmi's affairs. From now on, wanting to know which gate to enter. In response, he heard a nervous mention of terrorists. Kim became alarmed and asked loudly. Clicking her tongue at the hero to make him be quiet, Eunmi started talking about some rather unusual terrorists. The girl called the monsters themselves the method of their terror. Eunmi then paused. Then she touched on the breakthroughs in the gates that were occurring more and more frequently in her story. It would be true that someone would call them on purpose. Eunmi even specified how exactly the breakthrough occurred. At some point, in a random place and time, the gate opened. And then, from there, terrible and aggressive creatures began to seep into the world of people. Eunmi noted that there was something worse than breaking through the gate. If they were not cleared in time, destruction occurred. A direct path is formed between the human world and other dimensions. Everything that was there began to literally leak out, changing its previous appearance. But the worst thing was the monsters, which, under normal conditions, could not get into the human world. And that's when the situation became extremely dire. It was for this reason that people so desperately wanted to know the structure of the gate. Eunmi was sure that recently, someone had learned to deliberately cause gate breakthroughs. But then Kim noted that after the gates were cleared, they always disappeared. The girl denied this statement, making it clear that the criminals left some traces. So, she told about the crisis in the suburbs, where monsters appeared. Even though the monsters were killed, the gate in that place still remained. A couple of days later, Kim showed up at the place Eunmi had designated. He stopped and looked at the gate, whose appearance he had never seen before. Silently, the hero began to think for a long time. Just then, someone called out to him. It was Eunmi, who did not expect to meet Kim in this place before herself. Then, the man walking next to the girl suddenly bowed to Kim. Eunmi explained that the man was accompanying the hero to ensure his safety, further announcing that the gates had been cleared, which meant that Kim should not have encountered any danger. The hero looked at the gate again, finding its appearance frightening. A little later, Kim and the escort stepped inside the gate. The heat that reigned inside squeezed all the juices out of people. Kim silently confirmed Eunmi's words that there were no monsters anywhere, and the person seeing Kim off expressed a desire to return, since everything had been examined. Although the plan failed, Kim himself did not waste his time. Eunmi, who was in the human world, noticed the gate's activity. The people came out of there exhausted. Before reporting, Kim asked for water. To the sounds of greedy water consumption, the girl tried to find out if Kim had found something inside the gate. Having finished drinking, the hero reported that the news was bad. The hero assured that it would not be possible to establish the criminal's identity. Kim explained that no traces were found, and at the same time the hero saw something strange, namely the gate itself. Kim was sure that they had opened through the efforts of the Awakened One. With apprehension, Unmi repeated Kim's words. To paraphrase, Kim was deciphering that the gates found were just a trap, further claiming that the gates found led to a dungeon that was not connected to anything. Kim even doubted that such a gate could be used for a breakthrough. After all, there could have been hundreds of entrances, and those would have only served the function of fast movement. Moreover, the hero was sure that these strange gates were far from the first. Recalling, Unmi named a couple more similar cases, but in those versions, the gate breakthrough still happened. Kim believed that the criminal would play correctly. The hero assumed that the criminal was covering his tracks, and that all previously opened gates were the work of the same person. Kim even regretted to himself that he had not entered the body of this gifted terrorist. The hero then asked Unmi not to enter the gate he had found again. Kim explained that the gate was unstable and could close at any moment. Unmi couldn't do that because she desperately needed clues. However, Unmi was unable to do anything, because as Kim had reported, the gate soon slammed shut. The only clue to the terrorist's identity was lost. Strangely enough, from that very moment on, the opening of new gates and their subsequent breakthroughs also ceased. Kim noted that even news on this matter has practically disappeared from the information space. These events have been going on for a week now, and a whole investigative team has even been created. It was just then, while Kim was aimlessly reading the comments on the news, that Unmi called him. The hero expected that the girl had managed to find new clues regarding the terrorist. However, Unmi asked the hero to urgently come to an unusual place. About an hour later, the characters were making their way through a dense and dark forest. Kim wasn't sure he could help Unmi with her current request, but the girl didn't see any problems, and, moreover, she took the bulk of the responsibilities upon herself. After all, thanks to her skills, Unmi could quite easily track almost any person. At some point, the girl stopped, as if she felt something underneath her. Kim even decided to make sure that Unmi's feelings were accurate. Unmi's feelings did not fail her, however. She, like Kim, doubted that the missing person was actually buried underground. She even suggested that the search party might have been lured. Finally, Kim understood that he had been called to check everything. Indirectly, Kim's thoughts were confirmed by Unmi. The hero even laughed at himself a little, because the girl called him an active hunter. Then, clearing his throat, Kim pretended as if he had not said anything at all. Walking forward, he urged Unmi not to waste time. The search party's journey took some time. Soon, in the middle of some unremarkable bushes, footprints were found. It was then that Unmi called out to everyone. Again, she felt the abducted person who was underground. The girl believed that this time her feelings had not failed, but none of them realized that the search party was being secretly watched. Quite quickly, other forces arrived on the scene. Unmi reported that the location of the missing person had been accurately established. The arriving chief was not averse to making sure of everything and beginning excavations. Afterwards, the boss began to give orders. Having also decided not to sit idly by, Unmi invited Kim to explore the area. The hero did not argue and agreed. Moreover, the girl had used up all her strength and her skills had become inactive. The girl was ashamed of such moments, because she began to feel like an empty shell. Unmi sadly left all other matters to the second group of Awakened. Having moved a little away from the excavation site, Kim reported that he did not see anything suspicious nearby. Kim specified that in any case, he did not feel any magical traps. Unmi laughed with joy, but not for long. Suddenly, she asked Kim to slow down. After which, the girl suddenly began to point somewhere. With her finger, she pointed at one of the trees. Kim tried to peer into the darkness of the night, but he saw nothing there. Then, just in case, I decided to study the issue of mana. His vision changed, and in the darkness of the forest, he clearly saw a silhouette imbued with magic. Kim even said out loud that there was an awakened one in the forest. Without further elaboration, Unmi rushed back to call the second group for help. Kim continued to stare into the darkness where someone was hiding behind a tree. At some point, a head in a hat looked out from there. Kim was still watching, wondering where this man could have come from in such a place. Taking a closer look, the hero even saw that it was probably a person chewing something. It was just then that Unmi arrived with reinforcements. Meanwhile, the unknown awakened one was nourishing his body with mana. A second later, magical vapors formed around him. Seemingly understanding the unknown person's intention, the hero froze. He definitely felt how an unknown person was aiming a clot of magic at someone. As soon as possible, Kim moved towards Unmi. As he walked, he tried to warn the girl about the danger. At the same time, the unknown person was finishing his magic cast. A fairly large part of the territory was subject to magical influence. For a moment, a whirlwind appeared there. Unmi screamed in fear. Being nearby, Kim asked her not to be afraid. The girl opened her eyes and looked at Kim with confusion. Maintaining his composure, the hero added that soon everyone caught in the whirlwind would fall. As Kim said, the people caught up in the magical whirlwind were drawn somewhere. Before anyone could even come to their senses, they all fell, one after another, into a certain body of water. A second later, the poor fellows who had fallen into the water appeared from the water. While Unmi was drowning and calling for help, Kim was calmly floating on his back. Now he looked up, having no idea where everyone was. And in general, the hero found the general landscape very strange. Kim assumed he was back inside the gate. A minute later, Kim was pulled out of his thoughts by a distressed voice. Even though Unmi was pulled out of the water, she did not come to her senses. A moment later, the girl began to cough and showed signs of life. Kim began to emerge from the water, announcing that, apparently, everyone had ended up in the gate. After which, he pointed to the ceiling, where the entrance was closed. From now on, Kim could guess how exactly people disappeared without a trace. And yet, no more than 3 people were pulled inside the gate. Meanwhile, there was someone else in the cave. Some frightened guys were staring at the newcomers. The first to see them was a policeman. The guys immediately rushed to the new arrivals, thinking that they would be rescued now. The children cried, simultaneously begging for salvation and thanking them for coming. But first, the confused policeman himself would like to know what happened. Then the children started saying that all the others had died. Moreover, it turned out that everyone ended up in the gate famous for its ice monsters. The gate's rank was low, and Kim figured that 1 B-rank hunter would be more than enough. While looking around, Kim's attention was drawn to Unmi. She was acting strangely, shaking and looking dejected. The hero leaned over the girl, trying to call her. Suddenly Unmi burst into tears. She began to loudly beg to be released from the gate. By chance, the story took a digression to tell about Unmi's childhood. The girl's childhood was simple, filled with study and work. Unmi was diligent, but her parents did not want her to live that hard life in the fields. Being stubborn, the girl still came to her parents' aid every time. Back then, Unmi's life consisted of nothing but everyday life. But one day, an unusually strong wind blew. The girl's previously peaceful and carefree life came to an end. Monsters appeared, and the world was stained with scarlet blood. At some point, the gates opened. Ordinary villagers froze in indescribable horror. The flying monster that emerged from the gate spread its wings. With a wave of its arms and a toothy mouth open, it headed straight for Unmi. Filled with fear, the girl then stood rooted to the spot. It was then that Unmi's mother's strong hands grabbed the hem of her clothes and threw her aside. Then the monster's razor-sharp teeth grabbed the mother instead of the girl. Completely horrified by what had happened, little Unmi began calling for her mother. She remembered this bloody spectacle for the rest of her life. Of course, the girl's father tried to save his wife, but he could do nothing against the monster that was carrying off its victim. Still trying to save his wife, the man managed to grab the flying creature by the paw. What continues has become another blow for Unmi. After all, the monster, not paying any attention to him, rose higher and higher, until finally it returned to the gate. Thus, in one day, little Unmi lost both parents at once. And just then, the winds of magic rose above the girl. Thus, Unmi was born for the second time as a B-rank hunter. But Kim knew nothing about this story. No matter how he tried to call her, the attack the girl was experiencing was incredibly strong. Without saying a word, everyone else watched Kim's attempts to bring Unmi back to normal. The hero realized that he couldn't give up, because only Unmi out of everyone present was a B-rank hunter. Kim decided to use the practice of counting, after which Unmi was supposed to come out of her stupor. Nevertheless, she understood perfectly well that in an unstable emotional state, the girl could do anything. So, even though he was afraid, Kim began to count. When the number 3 was named, the girl suddenly sighed. Now Unmi's breathing became even and the shaking decreased. Believing that Unmi had returned, Kim began to explain to her the danger of the situation. But the girl flatly refused to help in any way. Almost in tears, Unmi reported that she had never fought monsters of her level before. Unmi really hoped that Kim would be able to help her. The girl began to cry again and begged the hero for her salvation, still considering him a high-ranking hunter. Unmi claimed that she was just a detective and had no other skills. Then she began to repeat over and over again that she could not do anything. Then Kim concluded that Unmi would die with everyone else. But even such words failed to inspire even a modicum of courage in Unmi. Suddenly, the hero firmly pulled Unmi by the shoulder. Pressing her with his voice, the hero claimed that the girl had awakened as a hunter, not a detective. Kim's words were so convincing that in a split second, Unmi stopped crying. In fact, Kim knew the situation with Unmi from the very first meeting. Being a great magician, Kim spoke about the wind skill that Eunmi possessed. The girl confirmed the truth of what was said. Even though Kim was right about everything, he didn't know that Eunmi's skill wasn't showing up. Every time she tried to summon the magical wind, Eunmi fell into a stupor, because the image of her parents' death hung before her eyes. This was the first time Kim had encountered a block of magic like this, which was dependent on psychological problems. Kim subsequently stepped back. He then went on to claim that Eunmi was physically healthy, but all her problems were in her head. Kim was confident that Eunmi could defeat all the monsters inside the gate if she regained control of the skill. The hero even asked the girl to simply believe him. Eunmi was mesmerized by this speech. Eunmi especially didn't expect to hear such a thing from a hunter like Kim. Their further conversation was interrupted by a piercing scream. Kim turned around at the sound of the scream and froze. For there, a flying creature chased after those who got inside the gate. The blind monster hissed, planning to land on its victims. For the first time, Kim cursed loudly to himself. Then he called Eunmi so that the girl could flee. But Eunmi, frozen with fear, could not move. Moreover, the monster switched to pursuing Kim himself. At the moment of his escape, the hero saw something strange. The flying monster strangely ignored Eunmi. He even thought that the problem lay in the fact that the girl had not moved from her place. Continuing to run and not noticing the stone under his feet, Kim predictably stumbled. Then he fell to the ground with all his might. Mechanically, he looked back. The monster hung in the air right in front of him, and death was near. So, for the last time, Kim called on Eunmi for help. Hearing the call for help, the girl perked up. It was just then, when Kim called for help, that the monster's spiked tail pierced his body. The hero gasped, and a trickle of blood appeared from his mouth. Seeing this, Eunmi was even more shocked. Before her eyes, a man who might have meant something to Eunmi was dying. Eunmi even tried to take a step towards Kim, but her legs wouldn't obey her. The girl's head was seething with internal contradictions. It would be true that Kim really was an insignificant, low-ranking hunter. However, Eunmi was at a loss as to what to do. Eunmi knew that Kim's future fate was unenviable. Having carried him to his lair, the monster would have devoured the hero there. Her heart began to pound, and the scene of her parents' death appeared before her eyes again. At the moment of this delay, the monster began to lift Kim above the ground. The girl screamed, not wanting to let this happen. Immediately, her body began to be saturated with the winds of magic. She screamed furiously, ordering the monster to stop. Following which, her wind magic skill worked. A tearing airstream appeared and flew straight towards the monster. In an instant, the monster was chopped up. The freed Kim began to fall. Eunmi clearly saw the result. Even though the monster was destroyed, the hero found himself in danger again. So, using the wind skill on herself, Eunmi sped up her movements. She ran to the place where Kim fell just in time. After which, she caught him. What happened was so incredible that Eunmi immediately put Kim on the floor. Then he began to examine the hero, hoping that he was not seriously injured. The girl didn't know how exactly to help Kim, because she didn't even have any recovery potions at hand. Suddenly, Kim croaked that Eunmi had actually used the skill. The hero was glad to see that Eunmi had managed to overcome the psychological barrier. Besides, I thanked the girl for saving me. Tears welled up in Eunmi's eyes again, as she didn't expect to be able to save anyone. Coming out of hiding, the other prisoners of the gate hurried towards the characters. It goes without saying that none of them could help Kim. At that moment, Kim began to move, wheezing. The policeman helped him up. It was now that Eunmi learned that all this time, Kim had been keeping a recovery potion with him. And in general, Kim was incredibly calm despite the fact that a huge spike had pierced his chest. Eunmi even thought that the hero would probably lose his mind due to severe pain. In order to be alone with himself, Kim moved away from the others. No one noticed his absence, because everyone was busy with the crying of the children. Standing nearby behind a stone, the hero lamented that he had almost lost his recently begun new life. Then, with a shaking hand, he grabbed the thorn. Then he pulled with all his might. The more Kim pulled out the thorn, the more blood oozed from his wound. At some point, he pulled it out completely and threw it on the ground. Enduring the pain, Kim took out an ampule with a magic amplifier from his inside pocket. Having opened it, he began to greedily swallow its contents. Then, through magic, the hero began to heal himself. In a matter of seconds, Kim's wound healed. Meanwhile, Eunmi was worried about Kim, hoping that everything would be okay with him. Suddenly, her eyes flinched. Kim emerged from behind the stone, having completed his treatment. The girl was impressed, because the potion literally completely healed the hero's wound. Eunmi was not in a stupor for long, because Kim approached her. Kim reminded them that they still had to deal with the boss, since that was the only way to leave the gate. The girl did not argue with the hero's words, but doubted his success. The hero reassured Unmi, assuring her that he would be there. This is where the clearing of the dungeon began. Kim helped Unmi control magic and straighten the mana flows in every possible way. In dangerous moments, he called out to the girl, pointed out a danger that Unmi might have missed anyway. Under Kim's guidance, the girl acted quite effectively. One by one, with the force of the wind, she chopped down the monsters. Every time Unmi succeeded, the hero supported him with his commentary. When the horde of monsters was cleared, the other characters emerged from their hiding places. They all rejoiced at Unmi's victories, believing that now they would definitely get out of the gate. But before moving on, Kim suggested taking a break. While Kim explained how necessary a break might be, Unmi herself was deciding whether to tell the truth. After all, the girl had no experience at all in clearing the gates, and now everyone had very high expectations for it. In particular, Unmi's victory over the gate boss. Barely restraining herself, the girl did not show that she was overcome with fear. Many looked at Unmi with anticipation of a miracle. But the girl herself wasn't even sure that she would be able to reach the boss. So, when the holiday began, the girl hid away from everyone in a corner. Understanding Unmi's feelings perfectly, the hero approached her. Kim took the blame for forcing Unmi to stand up and start fighting. Sitting down next to him, the hero asked for forgiveness for all this. And in general, Kim designated the culprit as merely a terrorist. Still, he asked Unmi to be patient for the good of everyone. Kim was sure that if Unmi had survived here, she would have been able to survive in any other gate. Finishing his speech, the hero asked the girl to set out on her journey when she was ready. Suddenly, smiling after hearing everything, Unmi stood up. Finally, she was ready to give the boss a dressing down. And then their common path continued. At a certain point, Kim stopped everyone. Having reached the tall door, the hero clearly felt that the boss was behind it. Since the danger was great, Kim took only himself and Unmi inside. Next, both hunters went straight to the boss's lair. Beyond the gates, they were met by an icy blizzard. Amidst the snow that obscured vision, someone's muffled roar could be heard. The ice wyvern was walking around its territory. Having studied the boss, Kim saw the best method of fighting him as using Unmi's skill. The girl nodded, hoping that she would be able to destroy the monster with just one blow. With a snap of her fingers, she summoned the power of the winds. The cutting embrace of the wind touched the monster. Having barely received damage, the monster jumped to the side. Unmi froze at what happened, because the boss was still alive. Seeing that the girl was slowing down again, Kim tried to bring her to her senses. Besides, the boss was about to respond with his own magical attack. Taking a deep breath, the wyvern began to exhale icy pollen. Naturally, Kim began to escape from her by fleeing. Only Unmi remained in the affected area, but the girl reacted in time and countered the ice magic with her own skill. Immediately after this, the boss roared and tried to trample Unmi with his paws. Without waiting for her death, Unmi began to escape the attack. Kim watched this action. He could clearly see that Unmi was at her limit. With each passing second, the chances of defeating the boss melted away. Moreover, the test was difficult for Unmi. In fact, it was her first serious fight. But Kim also saw some comfort in what was happening. There was a chance that the wyvern boss would fall much earlier than Unmi. Meanwhile, their great battle continued. As always, Unmi blocked any magical attacks from the boss with her own. Immediately after this, an event that was already familiar to the girl took place. The boss intended to crush her again. But this time, Unmi didn't try to escape. Using the skill at the right moment, she deprived the boss of his raised paw. The wyvern roared as its limb was severed. The pain only increased the boss's pressure, and the tail came into play. The wyvern shook it and tried to pierce Unmi. Controlling the situation, the girl eluded the attack. But right now, a heavy breath of fatigue overtook her. Unmi's mana was thinning too quickly, so much so that even breathing became difficult for her. This meant that Unmi had to win as quickly as possible. In connection with this, she used the skill again, raising a new wave of piercing wind. Her magic successfully hit the boss. Another burst of damage was dealt, after which the wyvern's displeased roar was heard. The boss then made a counter-move by waving his tail in an unusual manner. Only by jumping up did Unmi manage to save herself from being tripped. Then she used the skill again. The incredibly sharp air once again deprived the boss of more limbs. Having become completely enraged, the wyvern tried at all costs to get Unmi. The girl couldn't allow something like this to happen, and activated the skill again. A new gust of wind on the boss, new wounds and injuries that he received. Unmi's actions were cruel. She intended for the boss to finally be killed, and right now, uncertainty appeared on her face. Because of the lack of mana, magic practically ceased to function. The girl could do nothing more. And just then, the boss's mouth opened before her. At that moment, a sound of stomping was heard from the side. It was Kim who came to Eunmi's aid with his weak magic. Having briefly blinded the wyvern, the hero called for Eunmi to finish off the boss. Kim knew about the mana shortage and urged Eunmi to gather and use all the remaining mana. The hero demanded that Eunmi pull herself together and stop fooling around. Kim asked reproachfully if Eunmi really wanted everyone to die because of her. After hearing this, tears appeared in her eyes. One after another, images of her parents' death, but also of her happy life with them, flashed through her mind. The emotional collapse that Eunmi caused within him fueled the remaining mana. Screaming in rage, she released another wave of wind. The power of this cast was so great that the boss was literally destroyed with one touch. The furious wyvern was finally defeated. When the wind died down, the pieces of the boss that had been thrown into the air began to slap the ground. Looking at all this, Eunmi breathed heavily. Catching her breath and speaking out loud, she couldn't believe she had managed to gain the upper hand. And yet, she didn't understand how exactly this had happened. Then, her puzzled gaze fell on Kim, who, seconds before, had managed to distract the boss. Eunmi came out of these thoughts when Kim approached and praised her. The girl practically didn't respond, because for the first time she defeated an entire boss. Moreover, while praising Eunmi, other characters were already running inside the hall. The girl was praised not only for the victory, but also for saving everyone. Afterwards, the rescued girl pointed somewhere. Right behind the boss's remains, a portal from the gate opened. Everyone looked there, after which Kim concluded that it was time to leave. While the others left through the portal, Eunmi looked at Kim's back. Moreover, she had no doubts regarding the hero. Not only did Kim save Eunmi, he also didn't receive a single scratch from the boss. For the girl, this meant that the hero was truly of the highest rank. Her internal reasoning was so long that even Kim noticed Eunmi's lag. It was at that moment that Eunmi turned to the hero. Seriously, she decided to ask if Kim was crazy. Naturally, the hero asked again, simultaneously hiding his bracelet behind his sleeve. Eventually, everyone left the dungeon. Now Kim could finally take off the bracelet. He was glad that he had taken the trouble to take with him the artifact that had saved him from any damage twice in a row. Kim only regretted that he had not been able to preserve the artifact for future moments. But in any case, it was only thanks to the bracelet that Kim managed to stay alive. Then the hero began to hide the bracelet, just to avoid bringing more problems upon himself. Right now, Eunmi appeared with a complaint in her voice. The hero completely did not understand women's quirks, and especially why Eunmi was already angry. One way or another, the girl quickly reached Kim. Eunmi was torn apart by emotions, because Kim had deceived everyone again. Even though the hero helped the girl overcome her childhood trauma, she had no intention of praising Kim. Then he began to accuse Kim of being clearly out of his mind. Kim didn't understand it at all. Moreover, the hero himself wanted to thank the girl. Kim openly believed that only Eunmi saved everyone. And again the hero's words left the girl in a stupor. At the end of his acceptance speech, Kim smiled sweetly. There was a long pause as Eunmi couldn't collect her thoughts. Moreover, strangers interrupted their conversation. The rescued girl thanked Eunmi. Her daughter's mother also agreed with her words. Eunmi became embarrassed and began to declare that the praise was unnecessary. And yet heavy thoughts haunted Eunmi. Throughout her stay inside the gate, the girl thought only about herself. Even though Eunmi received thanks from everyone, her thoughts often turned to Kim. In particular, the girl could only guess what thoughts were overwhelming him. He himself felt mortally tired. He hoped that he would be able to go home as soon as possible. Moreover, the criminal who sent people into the gate was arrested. Thinking that all the required work was completed, Kim rose from the stone. The hero remembered that at the moment of gratitude to Eunmi, he even managed to smile. Kim hoped that he had managed to accurately convey the full range of human emotions. Moreover, right now those who came said goodbye to Eunmi. The girl instantly moved her gaze back. Now Kim and Eunmi stared blankly at each other. Unexpectedly, the hero gave a villainous grin. From the outside, Kim's attempts to smile were truly frightening. Unable to bear it, Eunmi turned her back to him. Kim was left confused, because he had been training his facial muscles for a whole week before. And yet the hero admitted his defeat in this matter, only hoping that in the future, he will be able to enchant everyone with his smile. After which Kim walked away. At least a couple of days have passed since then. Eunmi spent her leisure time sipping a drink in her favorite cafe. Finally, someone said hello to her. It was Kay, apologizing for being late. As it turned out, the girl specifically invited Kay to the meeting. Having offered him coffee, she wanted to question the hunter. In particular, as far as Kim and friendship with him were concerned. The girl noted that it was just one innocent question that caused such a violent reaction in Kay. Eunmi made it clear that she had known for a long time about Kay's connection with Kim. The girl wanted to know how exactly Kay met him. Unmi tried to ease the tension by claiming that the girl's interest was purely personal. Then he decided to share his thoughts that Kim could have been a criminal. Unmi was ready to help Kei if he got into trouble because of Kim. Unable to bear it any longer, Kei began to defend and justify Kim. But he stopped when the girl said that the hero had hidden his rank. Unmi explained that such behavior was punishable and had no justification. Sweating, Kei agreed with Unmi's words. Being well informed about Kei, Unmi tried to get him to give up some information. Unmi's questions were sharp, so much so that Kei had no doubt about the girl's suspicions towards Kim. Kei was consumed by doubts, as the hero could have revealed his rank when he entered the gate with Unmi. Suddenly, Kei realized that in order to protect everyone, Kim was forced to drop his F-rank facade. This meant that Kei himself no longer had anything to hide. Unmi, in turn, continued to put pressure on him. Gulping, Kei prepared to lay all his cards on the table regarding Kim. For the good of all, he decided to tell Unmi everything he knew about the hero. He only hoped that the girl would keep such information a secret. Unmi nodded and readily agreed to this condition. After hearing this, a drop of sweat ran down Kei's cheek. He began his story with excitement. Kei's narrative was laid from afar, from the moment when his team was defeated. Kei openly stated that he remained alive only thanks to Kim. Unmi certainly didn't know such details. Kei didn't stop, frightening the girl with the details of what happened. The bloody battle scenes ended with Kei's triumphant appearance. From the outside, it looked as if the hunter was admiring what had happened. Having finished his story, he began to ask Unmi for leniency for Kim. Moreover, Kei believed that the hero hid his rank for a reason. Moreover, he began to remind the girl of one incident that was very similar to the situation with Kim. After all, not long ago there was a problem when ordinary people lost consciousness without exception due to S-rank magic. However, according to Kei, Kim did nothing even close to that. Unmi wasn't so confident in Kim, especially since he ate at her expense every day. And in general, she did not understand Kei's devotion to the hero. What was said made the hunter think. After a pause, he said that thanks to Kim he gained confidence. Kei was amazed by the hero's self-sacrifice. The hunter even told of a case when Kim deliberately exposed himself to attack. This story destroyed the entire previous picture of Unmi's doubts about Kim. But doubts were in no hurry to let the girl go. Besides, Kei only said good things about the hero. The girl tried to explain that Kim could also have bad sides. Kei was indignant because what Unmi said sounded wild. To confirm her words, the girl began to talk about an incident when Kim attacked another hunter. Kei quickly realized that they were talking about a scandal inside the White Labyrinth. Therefore, Unmi's accusation was not indicative of that. Kei didn't even realize how he revealed the secret that Kim had asked him to keep quiet about. After explaining that there was no direct fight between the hunters. Moreover, the hero told Kei the details of the story personally. In fact, Kei simply overheard Kim's conversation with Jason. But in fact, he only knew part of the truth. He retold what he heard then to Unmi. Kei was confident that Kim's actions were correct. Unmi, of course, asked again what exactly he meant. Kei was sure that Kim had personally nominated himself for the role of victim instead of Jason. Moreover, the hero later apologized. But no matter how hard Kei tried, the girl was not impressed. An F-rank attack on a top hunter sounded wild in principle. At the same time, it could mean that the hero actually hid his rank. After a little analysis, Unmi thanked Kei. She said that she would no longer regard the hero as a criminal. Unmi was convinced that whoever Kim was, he was definitely not a villain. And the girl no longer wanted to return to this topic. And therefore, she openly stated that Kim's concealment of his power was even for the best. Unmi explained that otherwise, the hero would not have been given a peaceful life. Besides, the balance of power was already fragile. The three most powerful guilds divided influence among themselves. While the Hunters Association watched everything, Unmi feared that the emergence of new powerful hunters could destroy the world. In her eyes, Kim could become the catalyst for this crisis. That's why Unmi thought it would be better for Kim to continue pretending to be weak. Moreover, the girl expressed not only her thoughts, but also an entire association. This speech brought a pleasant smile to Kei's face. Afterwards, asking Unmi not to worry about anything, he shared the news that Kim was actively refusing to cooperate with everyone. Unmi certainly didn't know about anything like that. What was said once again testified to Kim's concealment of his rank, which meant for now, it was time to relax. Gradually, the scene moved to the headquarters of one of the guilds. Kim, who came there, was thanked for his responsiveness. The man sitting opposite the hero introduced himself as the head of the Human Resources Department. Kim didn't take this information with much enthusiasm, and he looked wildly exhausted. In fact, I feel unwell from the sight and smell of coffee. The head of the HR department decided not to delay and get straight to the point. When he started talking about joining the guild, Kim stopped him. The hero's behavior became aggressive. He indignantly explained that he did not want to go to work. Suddenly, events moved back a couple of days. At that time, in the Tower of Magic, the method of recruiting Kim was actively discussed. Despite the contradictions, Esther insisted that Kim be brought in. Moreover, Esther's guild needed analysts. The head of the HR department was shocked by Kim's parameters. And even more so, he was confused by the price of the contract with that one. Esther didn't want to hear the scumbag whining. Moreover, being confident that Kim was hiding his rank, Esther asked her subordinate to be polite, just so as not to scare Kim off. Moreover, being ready to give Kim much more than already planned. Her intentions on this matter were clear. The head of the HR department continued to argue. Esther didn't know much about Kim, but she believed in him. Such arguments from the head of the guild for hiring sounded absurd. However, Esther no longer listened to her subordinate. After all, Kim's value had already been proven. The hero went through the labyrinth and even endured the entire curse. In Kim, seeing the most valuable tool. Coming out of her thoughts, she found her subordinate still standing in front of her. She immediately ordered the start of work on recruiting Kim. The subordinate only had to carry out the order. As he left, even he began to doubt Kim's low rank. Too much attention was paid to this. Already at the present time, the hero has almost descended into hysteria because of the words about work. The head of the HR department did not give up and tried to smooth over the situation. He explained that he contacted Kim because everyone was counting on a change in his decision. Next, he reached into the inside pocket of his clothing. After which, I put the contract on the table. Kim glanced at what was written on the paper. The hero found the conditions there overly generous. But even this could not convince Kim, so he refused. The head of the HR department never expected anything like this. Kim explained that he refused not because of offers from other parties. Kim made it clear that he had no intention of collaborating with anyone. The head of the HR department took the refusal hard. Kim turned out to be much less accommodating than even the most spoiled S-rank hunter. So, he admitted to a mistake in his calculations, now trying to flatter Kim. But no matter how hard he tried, it was no use. Not a single emotion appeared on the hero's face. Moreover, Kim himself was consumed with thoughts about his hatred of work. Exhaling, the head of the HR department admitted that nothing could be done, partly suggesting that Kim was tense about the contract itself, and therefore asking to consider it cancelled. From now on, being ready to make an informal proposal. Having spoken about the artifact, he pushed a new paper towards Kim. This time, Kim no longer had a persistent disgust. Besides, the work ahead was quite simple. The head of the HR department asked the hero to study the salary figures more closely. Having looked at the figures there only once, Kim immediately agreed. He was even ready to sign immediately. Not expecting such a change in mood, the head of the HR department was speechless. Kim impressed with his composure in any situation. Having done everything, Kim was ready to go to work. About 2 days have passed since then. Early in the morning, the head of the HR department came to his workplace. The secretary met him. He also reported that Kim was already waiting for his boss. He urgently headed towards the hero, hoping that step by step, he will be able to lure Kim into the guild. Finally meeting Kim at his office, the head of the HR department immediately went to the safe. After all, it was there that the artifact was kept for evaluation, behind the hidden passage of which an entire laboratory was hidden. Walking through the room, the hero was explained what he would have to work with. Kim expected the artifacts to be assessed to be unique. After walking a couple of meters, the head of the HR department introduced the facility. Just one glance told Kim that this was no easy task. A glowing dagger was kept in a special glass box. The head of the HR department said that the artifact was given the name of the Cursed Sword, and there was one good reason for this name. After all, the weapon dropped after one particular hunt. At a glance, it was clear that the item was unique.